from Harry?
I've just had apologies from Harry, Chair.
No problem. That's great. Thank you. Agenda item 3, Chairperson's business. 3.1 members refers to correspondence about issues facing substitute teachers at page 12 of tabled papers. Could I ask members to review those issues that are being raised and I think consider presentation to the committee, evidence to the committee on the issues facing substitute teachers in due course. I'll come back with a more substantive proposal in that regard, but I'm sure, like me, you are receiving concerns about the shortage and difficulty accessing substitute teachers and the terms and conditions that they are experiencing at the moment. So I'd ask if you review those papers and I'll come back with a more substantive response in that regard. 3.2 is the Education Curriculum, CPR and AED Bill. Can I advise members that the bill passed at the second stage on Monday the 8th of November and has been referred to the Education Committee for committee stage, and I look forward to progressing that bill in an efficient way with the committee. 3.3 is the Period Products Free Provision Bill. Can I advise members that the bill passed its second stage on Monday the 8th of November and has also been Tuesday the 9th of November and has been referred to the committee for committee stage. Will be the lead committee on that bill, working in partnership with a number of other committees who will need to respond to the bill as well. Happy enough in relation to those two bills then, Clark? Yeah?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, members, then agenda item 4 is draft minutes. Can I refer members to draft minutes of the committee meetings on the 3rd of November and 4th of November at pages 11 and 18 of your packs, and seek your agreement that the minutes are a complete and accurate record of proceedings. Agreed? Members could give me an audible agreed for our record, that would be great.
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Agenda item 5 is matters arising. There are no matters arising. And agenda item 6 is correspondence. Can I refer members to page 22, where we have 10 items of correspondence and a summary note at page 23. Clark, would you like to speak to the correspondence, please?
Yes, Chair. Sorry, bear with me just a second. Members, page 22 starts our correspondence, and there are 10 items, and there's a summary note as well. Robbie might want to speak to items 6.3 and 6.4, which are respectively a response from the Department of Education on tackling gambling-related harm and correspondence from the all-party group on reducing harm related to gambling and providing an inquiry report on the future regulation of gambling. So I know Robbie plays a role in that APG.
Yeah, Clark, that the initial response advises that the Department for Communities is leading a cross-departmental strategy group, and officials from the Department of Education are represented on that group, and the first meeting took place on the 19th of October, but other than that, there's not much more information. Robin?
Yeah, no, that's pretty much it. So they invited myself and Philip McGuigan, the Vice Chair of the APG, and it was just, basically the Minister for Communities has taken on board some of the suggestions that were made, and education will play a great part in terms of the prevention of gambling-related harm. And obviously, as you know, there's the prevention and the intervention. So health are on it for the intervention piece, education for the prevention piece. So that meeting did indeed happen, and it was just good to be part of it, to be honest, to see that cross-departmental ability in action. Thank you.
Good job. Thanks, Robin.
Note that for now then, that update.
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you. Item 6.5 on page 93 is correspondence from the Department of Education regarding the launch of a primary school therapeutic and counselling services pilot on the 2nd of November 2021, and that will operate until the end of March 2022. That's being carried out as part of the implementation of the joint DE and DOH Children and Young People's Emotional Health and Wellbeing in Education Framework. So are members content to note that update?
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 6.7 on page 110 is correspondence from National Museums NI seeking to meet with the committee and present its work on the Museum on the Move programme, which is being delivered in parallel with its education programme. Are members content to add that to the list of potential visits?
Agreed. Agreed, members? Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Item 6.8 on page 130 is correspondence from Parent Kind providing its school uniform poll report. The committee will be receiving a briefing from DE on school uniform policy at an upcoming meeting. At the earliest, that'll be the 24th of November and more likely the first week of December. Are members content to note that pending the update from the department?
Yeah, content to note that, and conscious that a number of other organisations have conducted important work on school uniform issues as well, such as the Parental Engagement Group. I don't know if time would allow us to add evidence from some of those groups to the briefing from the department on the issue as well. Maybe we can have a look at that offline. Yeah,
certainly. I think it's a really important issue that we can seek to have some stakeholders alongside the departmental officials. Yeah. Thank you, members. Item 6.9 on page 145 is correspondence from an individual about suicide prevention, resilience training and coping mechanisms being included in the school curriculum. Members just seeking views on that correspondence.
Perhaps we could Yeah, Diane, go ahead.
No, well, it's just, it really relates to that correspondence and also to the pilot project that was announced, the Happy Healthy Minds. Excuse my dogs, if they hear a noise, they bark. I've been around a number of schools in my constituency, and one of the things that teachers keep bringing up to me is the issue of increased anxiety levels, children with more stressed, difficulty settling children back into class after the disruptions of the last couple of years. I was wondering if the committee was interested in taking some evidence around that and looking at that, because it has reoccurred in every school that I've been to, whether that has been a primary or in the secondary end of things. And I just think that it is a reoccurring feature, and many of those teachers say to me that it will take a long time and a lot of investment to actually help pupils to get back to where they are. If you think of it, I mean, for example, a young pupil, one parent told me in P4, has had 1 year of school where their education has not been interrupted, and that's P1. And it's a huge amount of disruption to them. So therefore, there's been a lot of anxiety and issues. So just wondering, and that's sort of 2 examples in this correspondence pack where that has been an issue that had come up over and over again. Sorry, just my thoughts on it. I think it's an important issue.
Absolutely. The emotional health and well-being is an absolute priority for the committee, and obviously the hope is that the long campaigned for introduction of primary school counselling as well as post-primary counselling will help respond to that need that you're hearing about from schools, Diane. But yeah, I'd propose that we write to the Minister to ask in what way suicide prevention, resilience training and coping mechanisms, to quote the correspondent, are included in the curriculum, and content for us to give further consideration to how we would take further evidence on those matters, Diane.
Chair, can I just come in on the suggestion you've just made? Because I think it does tie back into the Healthy Happy Minds initiative as well. And unless I have missed it within the information presented to us, I'm not quite sure what the extent of the coverage is across Northern Ireland. And it might be just helpful if, based on what you have said yourself, Chair, and what Diane had said, if those 2 matters, I think, are related, could be tied in together, and maybe we could get some indication of whether or not someone would give us a short report face to face on the progress of the healthy minds, or healthy minds, whatever it is. If that could be done together, Chair, because I think that both items are tied in together.
Yeah, I agree, and you were right, Robin. Healthy, happy minds. I think it would be useful for us to take an evidence session in due course to get an update on the rollout of the primary schools counselling framework, otherwise known as Healthy, Happy Minds, and to consider taking evidence on the matters raised by Diane as well. So happy to consider that and to come back in forward work programme.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Clark.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Item 611 on page 19 of tabled papers is correspondence from DE informing the committee that a consultation on deferring school starting age was launched yesterday, and indicating that it intends to hold a number of engagement events, particularly with parents and young people, to gather their views on this issue. So members, it might be timely to check in with the department and see if we can schedule an update on that legislative initiative.
Agreed. And the committee has been writing to various education ministers for a prolonged period of time on flexible school starting age, so it would be excellent to get a briefing from the committee about the consultation. It is, I think it is responsible to note that it is, I do not like being anything other than optimistic, but I think it would be remiss to not manage hope and expectation here. But I think it is highly unlikely that this is going to result in legislation before the end of this mandate. It is worth noting. I wish it were not. I wish it were going to lead to legislation before the end of this mandate. But it is positive that at least a consultation has been initiated, and those organisations and people, mothers who have contacted me and have campaigned on this issue are ready to engage with that consultation in a productive way. So it would be great if we could get a briefing on that consultation as soon as possible. Clark, thank you.
Thank you. So other than that, members, if you're content, we'll dispose of the correspondence as per the summary note at page 23.
Agreed. Thank you.
Agreed.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, members. Okay, members, agenda item 7 is forward work programme. Can I refer members to a draft forward work programme on page 331 of your packs? And Clark, would you like to speak to the forward work programme?
Yeah, sorry, it's not opening for me.
Okay, I know you don't. Only if there's any, significant changes or points to raise. We don't need to go through every week. Members have that in front of them at page 331 there. If you want to raise any comments yourselves, members.
Yeah, really, it's just to point out to members that the integrated education bill sessions we're trying to fit everything in, before the end of the process, and really, do try to keep me appraised of your availability and attend as much of that as possible, because we need a quorum for all of these evidence sessions to have the material on the record, and there'll be some sessions in the next couple of weeks about consideration of the issues and resolution of the committee's position on the bill. Thank you.
Key sessions there, Clark. 18th of November, formal open session, clause by clause decision making on the bill. Yeah. But if members review the forward work programme and, as Clark says, take note of those key dates and ensure availability for those.
Chair, sorry to be a pain on this one, but could I come in? So on the 17th of November, we're going to get a clause by clause explanation of a legal explanation of the bill. And on the 18th of November, we're going to have a clause by clause decision making meeting on the bill. How will that give anybody time to consider what we're doing?
you'll be aware of how tight the timings are. And
I'm not. I mean, Chair, on this one, I am absolutely astounded by the fact that we are rushing headlong at this, and we are doing. I mean, on the 17th of November, I wrote it down. Committee clerk says we're getting a clause by clause legal explanation of the bill. The 18th of November, you're expecting us to make a decision on the bill.
Well, when did you request a legal clause?
Well, I of course requested it last week. I mean, I would like the views of the rest of the committee. Is this appropriate consideration?
I'm happy to do that. I will remind the committee we are now in the third Assembly business month of scrutiny of the bill and the 5th month after second stage. I'm happy to bring members in.
Yeah, Chair, like I don't want to be continuing to go on about this either, but I have concerns about how little time we have to go through some of these things. I understand things are pressured. I understand we have a lot on our agenda, but I just don't feel we're having sufficient time to scrutinise. Like there's real legal challenges here, and I'm really reluctant to be associated with what could end up as bad law. And what could end up having dire consequences for schools and education if it's not done right. And I just, Diane has raised a very valid point there, and I've continued to raise it in relation to how quickly it's going through and how little time we have to consider some of the big questions. And I understand what you've said, Chair, there about the length of time this has been at committee stage, but with the greatest respect, if there was an admission of early stage of this process that this bill would need to be amended, if it had been done properly from the outset, and that's not talking about the drafter, but if it had been done properly at the outset, we may not have had to take as much time.
I'm just going to try and insert objective reality here. We're in
Sure, could I come in at some stage as well?
Of course, Pat. We're in the 3rd month of Assembly business on this bill, and the 5th month after second stage. The characterisation of rushing, that it just doesn't stack up. But I'll pause and allow other commentary. Pat?
Thanks, Chair. And I mean, I suppose like most of us, I'd like to get this legislation through before the end of this mandate. Now, I mean, unfortunately, wish lists are for Christmas. We need to be realistic. And there are some issues. I mean, the issue that was raised this morning by Angela is it's worrying. And I mean, I would need some further consideration of what she has said. I mean, it's all very technical, and I suppose technical issues aren't our forte on the committee, so we need to look at that. However, leaving that aside, a number of contentious issues in the bill have been raised previously, and I have had some discussions with the proposer of the bill, who has suggested that she is going to make amendments to the bill herself. Mm-hmm. Now, that in itself raises issues. I mean, it's first of all, it's an acceptance that there are parts of the bill that are problematic. But secondly, if she brings forward amendments to the bill, then that needs to be given due consideration as well. So, I mean, I'm all for doing things quickly, but I'm more concerned about getting it right.
This isn't quick, folks. This isn't remotely quick. It's 3 months. Thanks for that, Pat.
I know, Chris, but when we only get a couple of minutes to interrogate the Examiner of Statutory Rules, you know, if we're only getting 45 minutes to question other sectors and so on, it is quick, you know.
Those are the timings. Those are conventional timings. The Examiner for Statutory Rules advice was provided in written format. Again, look, I don't want to seem objectionable to anybody here, but again, I'm trying to facilitate comment and question and not ask too much of myself. But you referred to a concern raised by Angela this morning. The concern raised by Angela this morning can be addressed in an amendment that we've agreed to draft, that I presume can be done in time for next week. We need to keep some perspective here in terms of conventional timings in relation to progressing committee stages of bills, and get down to business. If it's not remotely irregular that amendments would need to be made to a bill. We've already agreed one from this morning. The proposer is with us next week, and as you say, may well provide us with amendments that we can consider. We've requested legal advice that we can then consider, and the session after that is considering that advice and those amendments. I'm not going to get in the way of people's positions on the bill or proposals and amendments that they would like to make, but I am going to stand up for accuracy here in relation to due process. We're in the third month, and we need to keep some perspective as well on issues raised, amendments drafted, proposed and considered. That is our job. We need to get on with the job. I have no intention of approaching any other bill that comes to this committee than with the aim to be robust, comprehensive, but also efficient in order to pass legislation. Obviously members are entitled over the course of the last almost 3 months to be drafting their own amendments or bringing their own amendments and proposals to the committee to address concerns that are held. I don't want to labour this either. We want due process and due process.
I acknowledge what you're saying there, Chair, but would you acknowledge that there is some complexity within this bill, and there are parts of it that are problematic?
It's legislation, so yeah, there's always going to be scope for amendments. I think we're getting towards the crux areas of what those concerns are. One can whether they're my concerns or not, I can objectively identify that there have been concerns in relation to the term promote, and there have been concerns in relation to the presumption of new schools being integrated. So, those are the areas we've identified through quite a few evidence sessions, and those are the areas that I would expect to see members, including the proposer, potentially bringing forward amendments for our consideration. But again, trying to be objective, I don't think anyone at second stage or committee stage has said that they want to do anything other than amend the bill. Therefore, that's the job at hand, and that's what we need to get on with. Okay, any other members want to come in, or okay to move on?
Can I just ask one wee question? It's not so much to yourself, Chris, more to Pat, because I had to cancel my meeting with Kelly, unfortunately, just because obviously it was off last week.
Okay.
And at the forward work plan, it says Kelly is with us next Wednesday. Is that still correct?
Yes.
So, has anybody any idea? She had indicated to me in a conversation too that she is open to amendment and was considering amendment herself. Has anybody any indication? Is that what she's going to be presenting next week, or is it presenting on the bill as it was through the initial second stage?
I'm sure we could establish that quickly, Robbie, but I would imagine that it's with an openness to amendment, which the proposer set out on her first presentation to the committee. But obviously, if it is to put forward amendments, the earlier that members can get those to have given those good consideration in advance of next Wednesday, the better. So I'm sure the clerk could establish contact with the proposer on that regard.
Yeah, and there's more to ask her. Is she bringing any? Would she be bringing any amendments that she's going to propose? Because obviously she's had some conversations on some of those issues.
So just to reiterate, I think we could ask the clerk to contact the proposer and ask the proposer if she is bringing amendments forward, and if so, for us to get those as well in advance of next Wednesday as possible. Is that fair enough? Yeah.
Yeah, I understand she's going to bring a comprehensive update. So.
Okay, but Robbie, happy that there's a specific request there as to whether or not that's going to include amendments. Yeah,
absolutely. Yes, because it's just exactly the same thing as everybody else is talking about. Because if it's further reading, then that's
I think that's fair enough, and to acknowledge what other members have said, scheduling is tight. There's no way around that at this stage of the committee stage. Therefore, the more time we have to review the substance that we're considering at the meeting in advance of the meetings, which is how committees operate, the better. So if Clark could check in on that. Do members have specific amendments that they wish to put to us at this stage? Not yet. Okay.
Sorry, can I ask a question? Because this will be the first time that I've sat on legislation for men. I'm just going to be brutally honest. In terms of, is there a standard way that we bring them together? Yeah. Is there a system that we then now deploy? So if I have an amendment for clause 3, 7, 10, or whatever that is, to give it to the members here, or where does that go? Does it go through Evian?
Clark, you want to give us a bit of an update in terms of how the committee would bring forward amendments?
Yeah, bring them. I mean, if the committee wants to raise amendments, you can raise them at any of these integrated education discussion items that are all over the agenda, and then we'll take advice from the Bill Office about the detail of those amendments and the intention and how to avoid any unforeseen consequences with those amendments, so that we get good draft committee amendments made together. So that's the process.
Okay.
No problem. So any time from now, and obviously we have an informal consideration of the bill next Wednesday, Clark. So if members have amendments and we're going to be receiving any from the proposer, it would be useful to have members in advance of that as well, in order to inform our conversations. Members, any other points? I'm eager to get our witnesses in on this.
Could I ask, Chair, that you do record my absolute concern about the timetable around this? I think that this is, quite frankly, ludicrous.
Okay.
Yeah.
Daniel, do you want to add anything to that inaudible?
Yeah, I just don't want to continue to go down this route, but there's just not I have my concerns to that as well. I just from a legal point of view, there's the major issues.
That's grand. That's recorded, and you can continue to keep saying that, and the reality can continue to keep being the reality in terms of how long this committee stage has been. Everybody's happy in that regard.
Yeah, but Chair, the reality is that we have one day, to consider, the amendments. But in effect, if you look at the dates of the 17th and the 18th, like how is that robust scrutiny? The reality here is, Chair, that we are legislators, we are members of this committee, and we have 1,000 other things that go on in a week. I just don't see how this is possible to get sufficient scrutiny in order to ensure that we shape good legislation that will end up with good outcomes and good law. I just don't understand.
So formal consideration of the bill is on the 18th of November and also on the 24th of November, Clark, isn't that right? Yeah. So it's not one day.
No, it's not far off.
It's 8 days.
All of these integrated education items have been opportunities to propose amendments, ideas for amendment, to be honest.
So yeah, I think that's an important point, Daniel. The time to get the amendments on the table is now. I think we agree in that regard. And that's when you undertake a committee stage of a bill. That's the purpose of it, obviously. So if we can get in relation to those concerns that you refer to, if we can get amendments on the table in relation to those, that's what we're here to do. Diane, and then I'm going to move us on. Diane?
Yeah, and fair enough. And I accept all of that. But we're only going to get the legal advice on the bill on the 17th.
That's right.
Are you saying that we need amendments in for the formal consideration on the 18th? Because that, and I agree with Daniel on this, is not robust scrutiny or time to do that. So therefore, I think that the forward work plan needs to be looked at and viewed in that light.
18th and 24th, just to be accurate, formal consideration sessions on both the 18th and the 24th.
Well, with the greatest of respect, you can't have a formal consideration session and then reconsider on the 24th. So what are we going to do? When is this final cut-off going to be? Is it going to be the 17th or the 18th or the 24th, or what is it going to be? I mean, I'm making the point again that in order to get good legislation, nobody's saying that, but in order to get good legislation, you need all the appropriate advice in terms of that legislation. And it seems to me that one day, 17th to 18th, or even 18th to 24th, is very little time to do that.
Okay.
And I would like that recorded because I think that is very important.
Chair, can I make a quick point? I mean, first of all, the proposer of this bill has known for quite a while now that she needed to make changes, particularly around what I describe as the two Ps, the promote and the presumption. Now, I don't know what the delay is in bringing forward some sort of amendments to those clauses. But, I mean, and I'm no expert in bringing through legislation, but I will say this. In principle, it's a bit like a negotiation. The proposer comes forward, puts forward their the bill and what she wants and what she's prepared to accept. We then negotiate with her about what we want as a committee and what we're prepared to accept. And I mean, I wouldn't even contemplate bringing forward an amendment until such times as I know, what the sort of bottom line is. And so until Kelly brings forward her proposed amendments, if she does, around the promote, the insertion of promote into the statutory duty and the presumption that all new schools will be integrated schools, I mean, I'm not in a position to even think about formulating an amendment. Certainly, I have a rough draft in my head, but nothing that I would want to put down on paper yet.
Yeah, I'm conscious we're eating into evidence session from key witnesses here. Clark, I'll try and take an update from you to avoid me inserting into this, but the committee stage of a bill is for the committee to consider amendments. The interaction with the bill proposer is the interaction with the bill proposer. I'm happy to schedule whatever additional time members think is necessary before the 24th of November to get us through this, but it is the responsibility of the members of this committee to complete committee stage. And the 24th of November date has been available to us for quite some time. So a characterization of some sort of truncated process is not accurate. I don't really want to get into that too far though. Clark.
Clarification, please. Sorry.
Yes, Robbie. Yes.
Yeah, it's just the 24th has popped up, but what the 24th actually calls it is a formal consideration of the Integrated Education Bill Committee report. It's not that doesn't read like a consideration session. For me, what that would be, it would be the report of what we'd considered on the 18th. Is that not what that
is? I mean, yes. Clark, do you want to come in? So we really need to move on.
Yeah, there are informal considerations where the committee can do a clause by clause consideration and talk through the issues for each clause. So then you would formally come to a clause by clause session where those would then be reported in public session, those decisions, and then all of the material would be put together in a final report for the committee to look at. Yeah, that's what the process entails. No one has put down any amendments yet in this process. You know, and a lot of our main sectoral witnesses are appearing in the next couple of weeks, which is the first time that we were able to schedule those people. So that is a really unfortunate factor of the whole process. As members know, for any bill, you know, the bill office is open for the submission of amendments from the second stage debate, from the end of the second stage debate. No one has tabled any at all, no members or ministers or anything like that. And the committee will have to look at what it has and report on that, having taken as much evidence as it felt, you know, was necessary.
Members are then obviously entitled to vote for or against amendments at consideration stage, or for or against passage as well, ultimately. I'm really going to need to move us on here, folks, if that's okay, with a number of witnesses to get to here. Okay. Thanks, Clark. Agenda item 8 then, members, is our oral briefing from the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools and Catholic Schools Trustee Service on the Integrated Education Bill. Can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove members from the spotlight and to add our witnesses, and refer members to the Catholic Schools Trustee Service response to the committee's call for evidence at page 338, and the Council for Catholic Maintained Schools response to the committee's call for evidence at page 352. Can I give a very warm welcome and apologies for the delay in getting to you to Bishop Donal McKeown, Chairperson of the Northern Ireland Commission for Catholic Education, Mr. Gerry Campbell, Chief Executive, Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, Majella Corrigan, Director of School Planning and Provisions, Council for Catholic Maintained Schools, Fintan Murphy, Chief Executive, Catholic Schools Trustee Service. You're very welcome, folks. I can give you up to 10 minutes maximum for an opening statement, and then questions from members. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. Good to be here. I may have to slip out before our hour is up because I have another engagement shortly after 11:30. I'm here as Chair of CCMS, the Council of CCMS, and Chair of the Northern Ireland Commission for Catholic Education. I think we're all educationalists from our side of the table this morning. And I'll invite Gerry Campbell, Chief Executive of CCMS, and Fintan Murphy, Chief Executive of CSTS, to make a statement. Just opening comments on my own part. This is in many ways a very radical piece of legislation. And in very many ways, it's also a very narrow piece of legislation. I think almost everybody in Northern Ireland could sign up to one, too. That all our schools would intentionally promote and improve an ethos of diversity and so on. This is simply a bill which says that really can only be promoted in one sort of school, which is a radical, if narrow, piece of legislation which looks at a structure rather than an outcome. So I think that's really the starting point that we are coming from as we seek to create a diverse Northern Ireland. Gerry, can I bring you in at this stage?
Thank you, Bishop, and good morning, Chair and committee members. CCMS has provided a detailed response in the draft bill to the committee, and I would wish to draw out some of the response within the introductory comments this morning. CCMS is an NDPB established under the auspices of the Education Reform NI Order 1989, with the primary purpose of providing an upper tier of management for the Catholic maintained sector and in raising standards for within Catholic maintained schools. CCMS is the employing authority for all teachers in the Catholic maintained sector, and this equates to approximately 6,500 teachers, including principals, across 447 nursery, primary, special and post-primary schools. CCMS has a number of statutory duties, including the promotion and coordination in consultation with the trustees of Catholic maintained schools, the planning of the effective provision of such schools. And CCMS recognises, accepts and respects the right to existence of the different sectors in education in Northern Ireland. This diversity should be viewed positively in terms of the contribution that it brings to building a cohesive society, alongside ensuring that parental preferences are respected within an education system that meets the needs of all of our children. CCMS is concerned that the draft bill does not appear to recognise the contribution of and the diversity of the Catholic maintained sector and its schools. As society in Northern Ireland is becoming more secular and pluralised, parents from all backgrounds, religious, cultural and ethnic, are continuing to express their preference for education within a Catholic school. 44% of parents express a preference for that faith-based education, which delivers excellent educational outcomes, supported by strong pastoral care structures and systems and high-quality leadership. Catholic maintained schools, indeed all Catholic schools, are open to all faiths and none. Catholic education is naturally inclusive and provides the opportunity for holistic growth, academic excellence and achievement for all. In a mature society, it is essential that parents, carers and learners have the freedom to exercise the right to articulate a preference for the school that best meets their needs and their philosophical beliefs. Catholic schooling indeed is not unique to Northern Ireland. Catholic schools belong to a global network of Catholic education where pupils of all faiths and none are welcomed, cherished and supported to realise their potential alongside contributing to the common good and in building a better society for all. We can all agree that the education system faces many challenges, exacerbated now by the pressures brought about by the COVID pandemic. However, this draft bill, in our view, is at odds with ensuring diversity and respect and would fundamentally create a two-tiered system of education provision. Clause 1.2 of the draft bill aims to broaden the meaning of integrated education to encompass diversity, respect and understanding between those of different cultures, religious beliefs and none, those of different socio-economic backgrounds and of different abilities. CCMS again believes that this is the role that Catholic schools play in promoting a core message of respect, diversity and inclusion within our society. Indeed, the underlying philosophy and ethos of Catholic education enriches local communities and underpins the desire to create a better society for everyone. Statistics gathered from across CCMS schools shows that the percentage of children who identify as Catholic ranges at one end from 20% to nearly 100%. And in addition, 33.6% of our children in maintained schools are entitled to free school meals. Furthermore, recent DE data indicates that Catholic schools are becoming the choice of many newcomer families, with 53% of newcomer pupils attending Catholic schools, again underlining the high quality of pastoral and educational support available. And 65% of Catholic schools are also involved in shared education programmes of one way or another. Clause 4.1 proposes to place a specific duty in the Department of Education and other education bodies, including CCMS, to encourage, facilitate and promote integrated education. This would clearly be in conflict with CCMS's existing statutory duties as outlined within the aforementioned 1989 order. How realistically could CCMS be expected to fulfil those duties if it was required to promote integrated education above Catholic education within the Catholic maintained system? CCMS surely cannot be expected to promote two different sectors within the Northern Irish educational system. The inclusion of the word promote into legislation would also be extremely concerning at a departmental level, where effectively DE would be required to promote one sector above all others. No such duty exists for any other sector within education in Northern Ireland and would lead to the integrated sector being elevated above other education sectors. This is simply unworkable and conflicts with the principle of parental preference, ultimately having a negative impact on the rights of parents who so wish to choose a faith-based education for their child. Again, to be absolutely clear about this, CCMS does accept the rights of all the other sectors to operate within Northern Ireland and for parents to be able to articulate a preference for a particular school within a particular sector. The inclusion of the word promote is also concerning in relation to area planning. Much work has been done to establish collaboration and partnership working right across the sectors to support the progression of the departmental sustainable schools policy across all the area planning structures, with all the school sectors coming together and participating at each level of the area planning process. The area planning structures give a voice to all the sectors when looking at progressing area planning solutions. Excellent working relationships have been developed and do exist based on that cross-sectoral approach to area considerations. Again, it is unclear as to how the current objectives of area planning and area planning processes and structures could successfully sit alongside the duty to promote one sector above all others. Furthermore, with CCMS's statutory duty to promote and coordinate with trustees the planning of effective Catholic maintained provision, this proposed requirement for CCMS to promote integrated education would conflict with our area planning duties. Clause 7 also raises similar concerns based on the proposed presumption that any new school will be an integrated school unless special circumstances indicate that it is inappropriate. There is certainly a need for greater clarity in relation to this clause in terms of the spirit subsequently outlined versus the wording as drafted. As worded within the draft bill, this runs contrary to area planning and, if enacted, would call into question the progress of a number of projects currently under consideration. CCMS remains concerned that, as worded, this presumption applies to amalgamations, which require the closure of the existing schools and the establishment of a new school, and potentially this could also apply to all new builds within the capital programme. I reiterate that CCMS again recognises the needs of a range of sectors in any diverse society and supports the rights of parents to be able to articulate a preference for a particular school within a particular sector. However, it is important that this is recognised as a process for expressing preference and not a choice. There has been discussion around the draft bill in relation to parental preference and meeting demand. It is not clear how demand will be defined or measured. However, in some discussions with the committee thus far, this has been linked to the percentage of unsuccessful first preferences in the integrated sector. CCMS believes that the school system cannot be planned based on first choice preferences expressed. There will always be what could be categorised as more popular schools in any area. Other sectors can cite similar and higher percentages of unsuccessful first preference applications. If our system operated based on meeting first preference application demand for our most popular schools, their neighbouring schools would lose admissions and face increasing sustainability challenges, despite also offering excellent provision. Basing system planning on parental preference alone or qualifying the evidence of demand using first preference data only could encourage perverse incentives, or as it could be assumed by parents that more applications submitted for any particular school or a particular school, that more places would have to be approved. At post-primary level, we all recognise that such approach would grow our selective schools and have a negative impact upon our non-selective schools. Therefore, this remains an area within the bill where significant clarity is required. Any requirement to meet the demand of one sector above all others would invariably impact on enrolments elsewhere. Area planning allows all of the educational bodies to consider sustainable provision across the system as a whole and across all school types. And finally, with regards to the bill itself, the timing was initially concerning, particularly with the forthcoming independent review of education. That panel has now been appointed and has commenced its work, and CCMS will be engaging and is engaging with the panel and will continue to do so over the next 18 months as it completes its work. The independent review should provide the opportunity to review how the Northern Ireland education system operates, including how the various sectors interact and play their part in delivering educational outcomes. Ultimately, we believe that time and space needs to be afforded to the review panel to engage with stakeholders and to complete the report and make recommendations without significant changes being made to legislation in advance. That being said, we are where we are, and CCMS acknowledges the role that this committee needs to do in terms of scrutinising this draft legislation, and we are open and willing to work with this committee and others, our colleagues in the department, our other educational stakeholder partners, and the sponsor of the bill, Kelly Armstrong MLA, to ensure that any new legislation moving forward is workable, practical, and does not conflict with existing legislation or impact negatively on the Catholic maintained sector. Thank you, Chair. I'll pass across to my colleague, Fintan Murphy.
Yep, Gerry, can I just check your timings, because that's us in the 11 minutes, and I'm conscious you might want to engage with members as well. So you coming to a close shortly, yeah?
Yeah, I'll be brief.
Thanks very much.
So the Catholic Schools Trustee Service was established to provide professional support to the trustees of the Catholic school sector and their role within that. And it's in that context that we responded to the details of the bill. Just to begin with, I just would note that The bill defines an integrated school as a school which intentionally promotes, protects and improves an ethos of diversity, respect and understanding between those of different cultures and religious beliefs, and of none, between those of different socioeconomic backgrounds and between those of different abilities. We would contend that Catholic schools and their ethos, which provides a welcome to all, meets this definition. And I'm sure other sectors would argue that they too can meet that definition. In our submission, we looked at some of the background information to the bill, and I just briefly comment on a few of those. One of the issues mentioned was that this would establish better opportunities for local interaction with the community and business. And we would note that one of the factors that makes Catholic schools so successful is that they are wholly integrated into the communities in which the children come. This includes links to parish, to cultural organisations, and to local business. It also references an intention that this would build a system of education better reflective of society in which more and more people are defining themselves differently, taking into account the growing number of ethnic minority families and increased numbers of mixed marriages and mixed relationships. We would suggest that Catholic schools already provide for many such families and offer a welcome to all as individuals uniquely created by God. Indeed, Catholic schools are shown to be the choice of many such families, with recent statistics showing that 53% of all pupils identified as newcomers attend Catholic schools. The background information also refers to protecting local provision where separate schools are under pressure. CSTS, working on behalf of trustees along with the other sectoral bodies and managing authorities, recognise that in some areas the maintenance of local provision requires innovative solutions. Solutions already include collaborative working, shared education, shared campus projects, and shared education that trustees have fully supported throughout the developments. Trustees are also committed to the further development of new and emerging models of education, and we contend that such models should be based on the needs of a specific local community and not based on a one-solution model for every circumstance. And just finally to mention the promote and facilitate role. CSTS believes that the rights of parents exist to identify a preference for a particular school, and such a right is also extended to those parents who wish to choose an integrated school. But it also applies to Catholic schools, controlled schools, and Irish medium schools, for example. However, this objective in the bill provides for a preferential treatment of one sector over another and ignores the fact that currently over 90% of parents make a choice other than for integrated education. I'll leave it there.
Okay, thanks very much indeed for the opening statements. I'll try and keep my questions extremely brief, of course, to give other members as much opportunity as possible. Start by saying thank you for all the work that you do in education in Northern Ireland, and particularly during the extremely challenging circumstances of the pandemic, and a huge thanks for all that work and acknowledgement of it. In terms of, obviously you've raised issues that other people have raised with the bills in terms of promote and presume. Outside of those particular concerns, the principle of improving the way in which the Department for Education and other responsible bodies identify, assess and meet pupil and parental demand for integrated education. Do you support that?
Can I just come in? I think Fintan made the point, Chris, that most sectors in Northern Ireland are seeking to move towards a much greater integrating role of education. There are many schools not called integrated, which are much more integrated than integrated schools. So I think we're all committed to ensuring that we can integrate education provision and allow for the choice of parents. I mean, Donegal Port Stewart is heavily integrated, St Columban's Bangor, heavily integrated, St Malachy's Bangor, the school is in Mid-Ulster, heavily integrated racially. So I think we're all committed to integrating education as much as possible. And there seems to be a mixed message, even at the beginning of the bill, that integrated education is only what Seamus Tracy defines as integrated education. And I think
maybe I could
that's the problem for the drafting of the bill.
Then, Bishop, do you support the principle of improving the way in which we identify, assess and meet pupil and parental demand for integrated schools?
Well, I mean, there are many integrated schools which are undersubscribed and some which are heavily oversubscribed. I mean, I think that applies for all sorts of reasons. As Fintan suggests, that in some cases people choose a school because it's the least worst school in the area. I mean, parents want the best school in the area. When it comes to actually choosing what school to send their child to, you see what parents choose. But the vast majority of parents choose.
Just briefly for myself as well, if the options are available there for them to choose it. I suppose that I'm keen to kind of draw out that area planning process, and I know you touched on definition of demand. We've also made reference to the UNESCO Education Centre's use of the community conversation toolkit as well as a community-based way to identify, assess and meet demand rather than just reference to applications. Keen to bring Majella in, but how does area planning obviously works in a particular way in relation to maintain school? How do you see area planning currently working for pupils and parents that wish to attend integrated schools?
Can Majella take that one? That's obviously her forte in the CCMS.
Yeah. Thank you.
There's probably two parts to that question, Chair. The first part was around meeting demand, and I think you're quite right. The comment was made that it isn't about it not being clear how parental demand would be defined or measured. There has been discussion at the committee thus far around the area of unsuccessful first preferences, but I think it's quite challenging to base planning on a school system on parental preference and first preference applications. As Gerry said, there will always be more popular schools in an area. And if we look at applications for post-primary schools for this year, for example, around 25% of post-primary schools had applications that were 15% over what their approved enrolment was. That was first preference applications only, doesn't take into account all the others afterwards. But 3/4 of these were grammar schools. We'll not be surprised to hear that. So if our system was based on operating in terms of meeting the demand of first preference applications, in terms of our most popular post-primary, for example, one could imagine then that the selective sector would grow exponentially and all neighbouring schools would lose admissions and close on the basis of that. So, that is a challenge.
That's precisely what I'm asking. How do we enhance the identification, assessment and meeting of pupil and parental demand in a more interactive, a more robust way than the way you're referring to there? And I reference an example of attempts from the UNESCO Education Centre to use techniques such as the community conversation toolkit to do that. I think we're in agreement. I can't apply to a school that I prefer to attend if it doesn't exist in my area. So for me, I'm really interested in how we enhance the identification, assessment and meeting of demand. And I'd be keen to hear how you think the area planning process does that for integrated schools in comparison with Catholic maintained schools.
Sorry, just to finish off on the second part then, Chair, the area planning process isn't about an individual sector. The area planning process is a cross-sectoral approach. It's a collaborative approach with all parties represented at the table. All educational sector bodies are represented at all stages in the area planning process, and focus very much on area planning. And the Minister would have emphasised this in her statement earlier on in the year, is not about an individual's institution, it is about provision in an area. And you're quite right, that is something that everybody is working more successfully towards. Part of the challenge we face at the moment is that we are facing a period of demographic downturn as well, so we are going to have significant capacity in our schools. So there are a range of factors that need to be looked at, and each representative body at the area planning structures is in a position to bring forward proposals for their area to support the change in demand in their area, be that growth or be that a dip. And all other parties then can feed into that and approve actions going forward to the area plan. That looks at long-term planning. Short-term planning is dealt with through the temporary variations process through the Department of Education. But interestingly enough, it's not just about first preferences. When we look at applications across schools, we can see that actually there's not a pattern. And Fintan, you may have been going to come in on this. We see that in terms of first, second, third, fourth preferences, you don't see that same preference necessarily being expressed for the same type of school. People will jump across. So we need to do a bit more work in terms of what is it that people really want in comparison to what they express in surveys, in comparison to then how they actually apply.
Okay, I'm keen to bring other members in, but just one last question, because I really value the opportunity to interact with you on these matters. Bishop, you set out an express aim for Catholic maintained schools to be welcoming to all and to promote diversity. Would you be concerned with the extremely low percentage of Catholic maintained schools that are non-Catholic pupils then?
Yeah, I certainly am. I think there's all sorts of local reasons in Northern Ireland why Catholic schools here don't reflect the patterns that you find in almost every other jurisdiction around the world, where Catholic schools are the preferred option for people from outside the Catholic community. So obviously there are particular local reasons here why children would be, in many cases, I know from my own time as a principal of a school, we had pupils who wanted to come from a nearby area and were threatened in their own community that they don't dare come near that Catholic school. So there are all sorts of reasons why people will feel unincluded. Yet places like St. Columbanus, Loreto, Corrigan, and a number of others, as well as schools outside the Catholic sector, have shown that they are very welcoming, even at leadership level, to those who are not from within the Catholic community or have no background in that. So I think it's quite diverse, and we are very keen to ensure that Catholic schools work hard to be open to everybody and facilitate everybody.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, if I could just say Chair, if I could just say, Catholic schools are rooted in their own community, and it can be very challenging. If you have a school, for example, in the heart of West Belfast, it's naturally going to draw pupils coming from that particular religious background. And the same can apply for schools in other parts of Northern Ireland, and maybe the control check, whatever. What we can say is that, yes, we do want to improve the numbers of people coming to Catholic schools who come from a non-Catholic background. But society is developing and evolving here and maturing, and I think we all go along at the same. There's a certain pace of going along, but it just all can't be laid. I think for education, I think there's a lot of other factors that lead within this as our society begins to develop and mature.
Okay, bring in Pat Sheehan, MLA, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks to everyone this morning for their presentations. And the written submissions we received from CSTS and CCMS were very detailed and comprehensive. And I'm not going to go into those in too much detail myself, except to agree that many of us on the committee have found some aspects of this bill problematic, particularly as I described them, the 2 Ps, the promotion of the integrated sector over and above other sectors, and the presumption that every new school would be an integrated school. And that, of course, the bill in its present form would place a contradictory statutory obligation on CCMS. And I think that's something that has to be changed. And I believe the proposer of the bill recognises and acknowledges that. However, I want to ask a more general question. And I think there's a presumption that given the type of education system we have here, that in some way the Catholic sector is responsible for sectarianising the education system. I don't believe for a minute the proposer of the bill believes that, given that she herself is a product of the Catholic system, nor do I believe it. But I just wanted to know how you would respond to that. Thanks.
Can I maybe come in here, Bishop, as well? Thanks, Pat, for the question. It is disappointing when that comes out, not just for Catholic schools and Catholic education, but I would also say for our other partners within the broader education family, because our schools, whether they be Catholic maintained, controlled, integrated, Irish medium, they're all there with the key focus of developing our young people, enabling our young people to obviously gain academic qualifications, but to develop into mature, well-balanced individuals who can make a contribution to society, can make a contribution ultimately to the economy, get the right jobs. And it is we try not to focus on that because our system and our sectors all work very, very strongly and in partnership together. But it can be nearly demeaning, the fact that it's put out there sometimes as wider conversations that you have sectarianism in society, but only if you had a singular system, for example, or a singular body of every child went to a particular school. Our schools, and again I speak for the Catholic sector, played a very, very strong and supportive role in the last 30, 40 years through all the challenges that we had in society, and in many ways kept a lot of young men and young women away from getting involved in difficult situations. And I would dare say it's the same for other schools that existed as well. Our schools are they're well led by principals who've got our teachers and our support staff, but they're all there to develop our young people and enable them to be the best individuals that they can be. Whether they're Catholic, Protestant, any other denomination, or no faith at all, our schools are there to educate. Bishop might want to come in relation to where that Catholic ethos adds to that. But this is something to be celebrated. It's something to be respected. We don't give any apology for what a Catholic school is. As Bishop has already said, they exist worldwide. They make a positive contribution to education, to society, to growing an economy. And that is also the same within Northern Ireland. Unless Bishop maybe wants to add something there, Pat.
Just to come in, sorry to cut across you, Bishop, that's 3 minutes 30, Pat, and as a result of a lengthy unscheduled debate prior to this session, we're extremely tight for time. So just in case you have any key questions in relation to the bill, Pat.
How long have I got, Chris? How long have I got?
You have 1 minute and everybody else has about 2. Go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah,
sorry, Bishop McKeown.
Just to comment on your question, I suppose, for somebody who worked in school for many years, it's always been an annoyance to schools that there's a suggestion that they're sectarian. Our schools, right back through all of the difficult times we had, our schools generally were the organisations who came together first and brought communities together first. And I know as a pupil in a Catholic school in the 70s, I was involved in what you would now call shared education as a pupil with pupils in the local control school at a time when maybe at a political level we weren't ready for that. So I think rather than being sectarian, I think our schools actually have been centres where actually they've been forward thinking and bringing communities together for a long, long time.
Do you want to bring me in just a very quick minute? Pat, you know Mike Ritchie. Mike has a very good analysis. He said, when it comes to conflict anywhere in the world, there are 3 theologies. One is the status quo theology. Get rid of the bad people, put them in jail, let us nice people get back to what we always do. Second one was reconciliation theology. Bring them all together and that'll bring peace. He says, you have to look at the third one as well, the prophetic theology that asks in every conflict, not who's involved, but who's benefiting. We will never tackle sectarianism in Northern Ireland only by bringing people together, blaming it on Ballymurphy and Ballybean. We have to ask who's benefiting from sectarianism. Without that third question, the others really have no legs to stand on.
Okay, thanks for that. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Pat. Members, I have Robin, Daniel, Robbie, Diane and Nicola to bring in, and this slot is scheduled to finish at 11:30. So I'm going to have to try and limit you to about 3 minutes each, which will be 1 question and 1 answer most likely. I regret to have to do this. It is not. It is out with my control at this stage. Can I bring in Robin Newton, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. And I think the fact that you have to limit us to 3 minutes is indicating some of the concerns that were being expressed by members before we got to this evidence session around this bill. And I would welcome the delegation. I'm a strong supporter of integrated education, but I believe in the integrated education within the system that we have at the moment and chose integrated for our children at Methodist College, as it turns out. I supported strongly shared education when I was a member of OFM DFM. And I want to pick up maybe just on one comment. I had a number of questions here, Chair, which obviously we will not get to. But
Robin, you've used a minute already, Robin, so you might want to get the questions.
Comment by Mr. Campbell, Gerry Campbell, when he referred to a two-tier system. Can I just ask specifically, do you believe, do the panel believe that if this bill progressed, that indeed the sector, your sector, might be regarded as second-class educators?
Thank you, Robin. I think very clearly, if there was a promotion of one sector above all others, that is a two-tiered system. And effectively, it would place the control of the Irish medium alongside maintained and the voluntary grammar schools as well. To be fair to Kelly, I've had a number of discussions with Kelly, and I think Kelly understands and appreciates the challenges based within that. And certainly in private conversation with Kelly, she has not said to me that she wishes to see one sector over and above everybody else. We all work together, but the department cannot, in all honesty, have a statutory responsibility or duty to promote integrated education above everybody else, because it would just tip the apple cart up, and all the good work that does, it's not perfect. The systems are not perfect, but we do work together. We generally try to get the right schools, the area planning all at the right level for all of our young people across all the various areas in Northern Ireland. But to push one particular through the draft legislation as it stands, with one sector above everybody else, would just not work. And it would bring our own legislation, our founding legislation back in 1989, it brings it into direct conflict with a number of those statutory duties that we have. And I dare say that would probably be the same for other sectors as well.
Almost time, Robin, if you want to ask another question.
I'm not going to get, I have another 3 questions here, Chair. I'm just not going to get to them. So there's no point in me pursuing and posing the question and getting off an answer. So thank you, Chair, and thank you for your dedication.
Daniel McCrossan.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Bishop, you're most welcome, and it's very good to see you. And also to Gerry and your colleagues as well, Fintan, Majella, very welcome. Okay, I'm going to just follow on from a number of points already raised. Bishop, or Gerry, in your opinion, would this bill give parents seeking a place in an integrated school the right to one, while parents seeking a place in any other sector can only state it as a preference?
Is Majella the expert there on planning?
Yeah.
I wouldn't claim to be an expert, folks, but I think in terms of the question, Daniel, I suppose it's not so much about whether that they wouldn't be able to express a preference and that preference would be viewed as a right, but what it is suggesting is that where preferences to the integrated sector are expressed, they should be met. And therefore, if we follow that logic through, and the same was to apply to the 25% of post-primary schools, as I said earlier on, that have more first preferences than they are able to take, then that same logic would apply there. So we would end up with a system where basically the first preference demand would be met, which would mean that the less popular schools, for various reasons, would lose enrolment and admissions and therefore face sustainability challenges. The whole idea about the preference system is that it allows parents to express a number of preferences across schools in their area, and how they order those varies quite significantly. So I think basing anything on first preferences in terms of policy is something that would need a serious consideration.
Okay, thank you. I just want to, because I appreciate that.
Can I just make a comment? In the background information to the bill, it referenced the Miller-Brown 2013 poll. And a few things came out of that poll that maybe weren't included in the preamble to the bill. The first one being that there were very great differences in the understanding of the parents who were polled about what integrated education actually means. But 2 other factors that came through as well when they asked about the reasons why parents choose schools. The first 2 they mentioned were academic reputation and proximity, not integrated. So I think when you talk about parental preference and you try to put a school in place based on parental preference, you have to work out what is it they're actually preferring.
That's a very, very good point. Thank you, Fintan, for that. Just to move on to the next question that I have, the requirements of the bill have financial implications. I think that's quite obvious. Please tell us what you think they might amount to and how this could affect the other sectors in particular.
Well, I suppose the first thing I would say, if you think about judicial reviews coming down the line and the cost that there's going to be in relation to that, in terms of squaring this legislation as it stands, vis-a-vis the existing legislation for other organisations. So there's a cost that's going to come, and again, we wouldn't have a figure in relation to that. But that there's a high probability that would be something that would have to be overcome. That's 3 minutes, Daniel, if you want to ask a final question.
Yeah, just a final point, actually, Chair. Bishop, Gerry, Fintan, we do appreciate your absolute honesty in relation to these matters. There are quite a significant number of concerns raised in relation to how this legislation has been drafted and the implications it poses to all sectors as a consequence. And we're continuing to work through them. But I would look forward, I'm a wee bit rushed today. I have quite a number of questions, but I'll not enter into any further ones. But I would, Chair, like to see CCMS back with the committee for a longer session so that we can explore in more detail some of the wider concerns that do exist, because there are quite obviously quite a number of them.
I've been happy to schedule additional meetings at any stage of the committee stage, Daniel, and have, I think, attended every additional session that we've organised. Thanks for that, Daniel. Can I bring in Robbie Butler, MLA, please?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Bishop McKeown, Gerry and team. So I'm not going to use my 4 minutes, Chair, if that's okay, because I met with Gerry a number of weeks ago. We had a chat in and around the bill, and I think we share some of the concerns in and around some of the clauses. So I don't want to spend too much time on that. If you don't mind, guys, I would like to take up a little bit of time just in asking you, do you share what would be my party's view in terms of where education should be? And hopefully it'll be picked up in the independent review that's going to happen. That's with regard to what a single education system might look like and where CCMS may sit in that and what their vision might be for what a single education system may do. The reason I bring it in, Chair, and I make no apology for it, from my perspective, whilst I could and will help amend the bill if the independent review doesn't deliver a single education system, what will actually happen if this bill goes through is that we have a further sectoral and segmented sector. So I'm not sure that it helps do what it says on the tin, but can you give me your opinion just on what a single education system might look like?
Yeah, maybe could I just comment? I suppose we would argue that we currently have a single education system. We have a single Department of Education producing policy, and we have different types of school working to deliver that policy. And we think that within that provides parents with an opportunity to have a particular preference. And I think, we have a community in Northern Ireland now who are becoming much more pluralist and much more multicultural. And all of those new people, particularly coming in here, are brought in on the basis that we respect diversity and choice. And it seems to me a strange situation to have a much more pluralist, multicultural society, but then say, but you can only have one type of school.
Okay. And one of my thoughts on this, and it goes back to probably Pat saying at the start with regard to how we move Northern Ireland forward holistically. And I do agree that the problem perhaps isn't that where our kids are educated, because they actually live segregated rather than being educated, segregated education. They live segregated, so therefore go to the school that's possibly closest to and that type of thing. In terms of how we might look at other avenues for a single education system, is it the curriculum that you believe that we maybe need to look at, like a single education curriculum? I know we have a common curriculum, but let's be honest, that different things are taught in different schools. And should there be something more commonality across a number of key subjects, do you think? And finally, and this will be a wee bit more controversial, excuse me for doing it, but there's another issue that we need to deal with, and that is the teacher exemption. If anybody could speak about that and the FIDO, please, because that's something else we need to tackle, if that's okay.
Robbie, I gave you 3 minutes to ask questions on this bill, and you've circumnavigated all the key issues in education. Folks, a very brief response, if you can, to that.
Yeah.
Could I come in? Can I come in perhaps on the FIDO thing, if you don't mind? Is that okay, Chair?
Go ahead.
I think FIDO was, and the whole religious discrimination thing is a product of the 90s, where it was assumed everyone in Northern Ireland was a Catholic or a Protestant. And really, we have to look at the 2020s and see how we can ensure that we avoid discrimination against people and yet allow for diversity. If we're going down the road of one sector only, then you can't ask people in an Irish medium school, are you committed to our ethos? Or in an integrated school, are you committed to our ethos? Or a Catholic school, are you committed to our ethos? I think there has to be some form of legislation that replaces Fido, that enables diversity to be cherished and not feared.
Okay, thanks, Robbie. Can I bring
one final point, Chair?
Maybe if we just in terms of, Robbie, I'm not entirely sure this is completely answering what you're asking for, but in terms of what we need to look at from the point of view of how we move the system on, there was some information just yesterday that I was looking at, and it looks at where the differing attainment levels can be shown in our community. And obviously one of the things we want to look at is to make sure that every child achieves to their very best. And when you look at that difference across Protestant, Catholic, male, female, free school meals, non-free school meals, and selective versus non-selective, the most significant gap by quite a lot is how we look at the attainment of selective and non-selective pupils. So I think one of the things that we should be focusing on when we're looking at the review is how we ensure every child gets equal opportunity in their education to get the best education that they can, and to try and deal with some of the attainment gap that we see in terms of some of our schools.
Okay.
Just on the issue of curriculum as well, maybe Robbie, if I just mention, it is a bit of disappointment that this bill in relation to integrated education references that the bill might create equal quality of education, but it doesn't actually reference high quality education, which I think is what we need to work towards. And yes, in relation to a single system, if you want to call it that, I think as a system we should be having conversations about the curriculum and the quality of the education and how it prepares pupils for the lives they have ahead and the economy that we have to develop.
Good point. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, can I say I want to leave at this stage for another meeting? Is that possible? Okay.
Yeah, thanks very much indeed.
Another engagement. I'm happy to meet with you again at any stage. Happy to do that. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Can I bring in Diane Dodds, MLA, please? Thanks.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone, and apologies for waiting. And if I know the chair's been generous today, but it probably would say it's my fault. You highlight many of the issues of the bill that have been highlighted repeatedly during the evidence sessions that we've had on the committee. Can I just ask, what is your view of the bill and how it will impact on the drive towards shared education? I was up at my local high school in Banbridge. I was then up at St Patrick's High School in Banbridge, those two local schools to me. And it was amazing to see the diversity of uniforms walking about the corridor in both of those schools. And I do think that was a great example of sharing within the curriculum. How would that be impacted by the bill?
I think there are maybe a few issues with that. The department are currently working on a process for mainstreaming shared education for all schools. And again, this is an example of something that the department are currently doing. But if they were having to divert their energies to promoting a particular sector, the time and energy spent on things like shared education, and indeed the finance for things like shared education, might be diminished on the basis that the department would be forced to put more energy and funding into this promotion of one particular sector.
I think following on from that as well, as the Bishop said earlier on, there are many ways that our children integrate in our schools, and it doesn't necessarily need to be under the title of integration, and the shared education programme is an example of that. And the important thing to recognise there is that it is a programme, and that programme is available to all sectors, and all sectors currently participate in that. And the outworkings of that are very, very positive. So it is an area that I think we would need to be very careful that it's not damaged by any changes that are made in the intervening period.
Yeah, I must say I completely agree with you on that. My last question, because I have spoken to you individually about some of the other issues, the issue for me is that I think that one of your former contributions really chimed with me, is that one of the things that we really need to be doing is looking at the quality of education, how we can improve that quality of education, and how we can create more flexibility within the curriculum to address the needs of the economy and prospects for young people and school children at a later stage. And I worry that we're diverting our attention at times.
And you're right, Dan, that's something we need to do, because it's been the whole 14 to 19, the engagement between the Departments of Education and the economy. You hear this mentioned so many times, but we need to look at what is the skills required to develop this in our economy, to enhance our economy. What are the jobs of tomorrow?
Yes.
Can we equip our young people within our education system as it stands? And also that flexibility and the ease of negotiation between leaving school and going, whether it be to a further education college, onwards to university, apprenticeships, developing all those skills that people need, that is good for the individual, it's good for the community, and good ultimately for the wider economy.
Can I just say, I would really like to see us focus on what the curriculum needs to do to change to deliver that, particularly at Key Stage 3. And I think how we can increase sharing in schools across the curriculum needs, so that we have the broadest and most flexible offer to young people, all young people across our community.
Thanks, Diane. Thank you. Can I bring in Nicola Brogan, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for coming along here this morning. Listen, I think we've been across most of the main topics this morning already, and I definitely share with you, Gerry, the concerns you've outlined specifically about the clause 5 with the use of the word promote, and clause 7 with the presumption that all new schools would be an integrated school. In relation to the word promote, I do think it would elevate integrated education above all other sectors, and that's just wholly unfair in my opinion. And as already been discussed, I think the bill sponsor, Kelly Armstrong, has taken that on board, and hopefully changes will be made to that. But in regards to questions, I just want to touch upon the independent review into education. The panel has been appointed recently. Can I get your opinions on that there? Do you see, what difficulties do you see if we were to proceed with this bill in advance of the independent review and the findings from that review? What difficulties would you see from that?
I think, to be fair, Nicola, we've been very clear within our submission, but also in the conversations that we've had with the members of this committee. Our view would be that the independent review needed to complete its work. We are where we are. The committee will work its way through the scrutinisation of the legislation, the draft legislation as it sits. We will work with the committee and other colleagues within DE and other sectoral organisations to support the committee and as part of the process. But our view was that there was an independent review. The timings, the Minister announced the panel towards the end of September. The panel commenced its work on the 4th of October. We understand it's around about an 18-month period before they will finally make the recommendations on the report. But we will work with that independent review. There's a lot of things that need to be examined and considered within that review. And our view was that this bill would have been unhelpful in advance of that review taking place. But again, as I said in my opening remarks, we are where we are. And the committee is working its way through the draft legislation, and we will work with colleagues in relation to how things progress.
Okay, to be honest, I would share those concerns as well, Gerry. I would be afraid that it's doubling up the work, as it was going to have to be reimagined again after the findings from the review. So I do share those concerns. But listen, that's all from me. Thanks very much to the three of you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. We can't hear you, Chris.
Unmute the device, Chris. Can I say a sincere thanks to all witnesses for your contribution as part of this session. Daniel mentioned additional meetings. I'm happy to make myself available whenever, if that is desirable, but we're extremely grateful for the written and oral evidence that you've provided us with today, and we'll take that into close consideration for the committee stage of the bill. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Chair and members. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Okay, members, can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove witnesses? Clerk, I'd propose that we summarise actions at the end of our evidence sessions today, if that's agreeable. Yep.
Certainly,
yeah.
Chair.
Okay, that's great. Then I can move to agenda item 9, which is our oral briefing from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People on the Integrated Education Bill. Can I refer members to a briefing paper from the Commissioner on page 73 of tabled papers, and give a very warm welcome to Koulla Yiasouma, the Commissioner from the Northern Ireland Commissioner for Children and Young People, Mairead McCafferty, Chief Executive at the Northern Ireland Commission for Children and Young People, and advise you both that you have a maximum of 10 minutes to make an opening statement, although most people have gloriously disregarded any guide on timings I've given them today. If you stick to that, then we really are in the twilight zone, but do your best. do your best, and we're really glad to have you both with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And I've only got brief opening remarks, so I hope I will be the star evidence giver for the day. And just to add our thanks for the invitation to Mairead and I to speak to you today, and we're really pleased to be here. I'm not going to pretend we have been through every detail of the bill or taken legal advice, but we will be giving our overview, particularly of what the bill intends to achieve, and this word promote. As Commissioner for Children and Young People, as you are aware, I'm obliged to take into account the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child, which, as you would expect, says quite a lot about children's education. And specifically, Article 29 says that states parties agree that the education of the child should be directed to, firstly, the development of the child's personality, talents, and mental and physical abilities to their fullest potential. That they agree that education should be directed to the development and respect of human rights and fundamental freedoms. That it should be directed to the development of respect for the child's parents, his or her own cultural identity, language, and values. That it should be directed to the preparation of the child for a responsible life in a free society in the spirit of understanding, peace, and tolerance. And for the week that we're in today, that the aims of education should be directed to the development of respect for the natural environment. Therefore, anything that seeks to progress our education system has to be, in our view, bring us closer to achieving the aims articulated in Article 29. And that obviously is the test by which we are judging the Integrated Education Bill that we're discussing today. Many of you may have seen an article in Scope magazine this Sunday outlining the history in Northern Ireland of trying to introduce education, and that it dates back to 1831, 190 years ago. And as you know, the first integrated school was established in 1981 by a group of determined and visionary parents and educators. 40 years later, and in spite of legislative provision to encourage and facilitate integrated education, added to recommendations from local and international processes to promote and embed integrated education, just under 7% of our primary and post-primary schools are integrated today, or state that they're integrated. And just under 8% of children attend integrated primary or post-primary schools. The consequence of continued segregation, and I absolutely accept that not every child that goes to a maintained school identifies as Protestant, and not every child that goes to a controlled school identifies as Catholic. It's far more complicated than that. But regardless, we have a segregated education system along with segregated housing and communities. And the consequence of that segregation is an inefficient system with various bodies and structures supporting the different sectors. We do have we do not have one. We have one education system, but we have multiple sectors. There is still some uncertainty about the full cost of our education system, but studies, including one undertaken by the University of Ulster's Economic Policy Centre 5 years ago, noted the difference of additional annual public spending across a range of areas incurred in Northern Ireland, in comparison with other jurisdictions of the United Kingdom, are about £400 to £800 million that we spend on our segregated communities. And these reports also estimate that the additional cost of our education system in Northern Ireland is £1 million a week. Imagine what we could do with £50 million if we had one education sector. At the same time, and I've heard the committee's discussions, and at the same time, to counteract this segregation, the Education Authority's report on shared education records that in the years 2017 and 2018, we spent £285 million on encouraging contact between controlled and maintained schools. You will have seen from our written evidence that we're generally supportive of the bill and its intent to promote to the duty of government towards integrated education. In my view, the bill simply compels government to implement properly its duties from the 1989 Act and indeed the Good Friday Agreement by being explicit and introducing such statutory responsibilities in progressing that. We do recommend that Clause 2 is strengthened to include reference to children's rights and Article 29 of the UNCRC. If we agree that the aim of the education system is to nurture all children, including a respect for each other's culture and identity, then of course it is right that integrated should be the first option as outlined in Clause 7. But we have to bear in mind that only one new school has been opened in Northern Ireland in the last 5 years. Contrary to the song, our vision of integration should not be one of a melting pot. In that scenario, we all become the same, a brown, grey sludge type of thing. Integration has to be about the fruitcake, where you can see each piece of fruit and the sponge, or in this case, the school, holds them together, helps them to complement and celebrate each other. Or to quote Jane Elliott, we don't need a melting pot in this country, folks. We need a salad bowl. In a salad bowl, you put in the different things. You want the vegetables, the lettuce, the cucumbers and the onions and green peppers to maintain their identity. You appreciate the differences and that together they make a great entity. And that's really what we're looking for in our education, not one that artificially brings together children, one that supports children to be themselves, whatever that may be, to celebrate their culture and to follow and celebrate their religion if they have one. So we must move away from this idea that school sectors are better or worse than each other, or that they compete. They shouldn't. A single education system should bring together the best of all sectors. And I'm yet to be convinced that having so many sectors benefits our children. The bill does not, in my view, favour one sector over another, but instead tries to level the playing field. As you've already discussed, the bill doesn't operate in a vacuum of reform of our education system, and the review of education chaired by Sir Keir Bloomer, which has already been established, should, when it reports, outline the broad and long-term vision for education in Northern Ireland, including how we improve children's experience and attainment of education. And we believe that the Integration Education Bill will get us off the starting blocks. Thank you for listening. That was within 10 minutes, Chair, surely.
I'm astonished. Thank you very much indeed, Commissioner, for those opening remarks. Can I bring Deputy Chairperson Pat Sheehan, MLA, in for questions? And I'll stick with 3 minutes in the interest of fairness across all sessions. Thanks, Pat.
Thanks, Chair, and welcome to Koulla and Mairead to the committee this morning. I suppose most of us instinctively agree with our children being educated with other children from different backgrounds, whether it's religious, cultural, political, or whatever. I mean, most people think it's a good idea. And I've no doubt you agree with that yourselves. Now, what I want you to do is set that to the side for one moment and focus on this piece of draft legislation. Because sometimes legislation, if it isn't properly drafted, can have unintended consequences. And I want you to focus on that. And tell me, do you see any problems in this piece of draft legislation, or anything that you would feel uncomfortable with yourself? Thanks.
I think I understand what you're saying about unintended consequences. And when we talk about integrated education, I think when we talk about our divided community, so if I look at Pat, the community that you represent in West Belfast, that identifies predominantly as one religion. So the idea that you would open a school in the middle of the Falls Road, for example, and call it integrated and make children from all over the community, from all over Belfast, travel to that school because it's integrated, is an anathema. Our vision is the local school is the best school. That's the vision. That's the conversations we'll be having with the review, that the local school, the school in your community, is the best school for your child. It is absolute folly to think integrating our education system is going to solve the issues of Northern Ireland. It's not. So I genuinely, on reading the bill, bearing in mind I'm not a lawyer, but on genuine reading the bill, I do not see that this is going to suddenly throw our whole education system into flux. Genuinely, when I read the bill, I thought, finally, we are going to get to a place where we're going to give effect to this idea of encouraging and facilitating integrated education where the community wants it and where it's right for that community. Bearing in mind, Pat, that we're not opening new schools in Northern Ireland, and we've already got processes for integrating schools. Schools are moving from being one sector to integration. So I don't see any significant flaws, but I am mindful that when we need to tease out this word promote, I am mindful of that, and I am mindful that we are looking to a more radical reform of our education system, and this bill has to be seen within that context.
That's 3 minutes, but I'll try and let you ask another question there. Just ask your responders to be mindful as well. I'm really sorry about those timings. Thanks
for your generosity, Chair. And I mean, I've no difficulty with what you're saying, Koulla. The difficulty in legislation is, for example, you're talking about the community should decide what type of school it wants or it needs. It doesn't say that on the face of the bill. And one of the other outworkings of the legislation would be that CCMS, as an educational body, would have contradictory statutory obligations. So it has an obligation to its own sector, but it would also have an obligation for every new school to be presumed to be an integrated school. And you're actually wrong in what you say about there are no new schools opening, because there have been a significant number of amalgamations of schools over recent times, and they are classed as new schools. And again, there's no definition on the face of the bill of what a new school is. So I'm not going to delay any longer. That's just an issue that I see as problematic.
Okay.
Thanks, Pat. Maybe have an opportunity to respond to that again. Koulla, can I bring in Robin Newton, MLA, please?
Thank you, Chair, and welcome to the Commissioner and to Mairead. Good to see you again. I wonder if I could just pick up on the point you made. Obviously, if we were starting to build an educational system, we wouldn't start from where we are, and we wouldn't design, I think, what we have. And obviously the economic benefits to be gained by one educational sector overall are obvious, but we are where we are, and we have this new piece of legislation coming through. I think that the point one of the points I wanted to make was again on the presumption that each new school would be integrated. And I think you've answered, to the Deputy Chair in your answer there, where new schools will be created. Maybe an amalgamation, but will still be a new school. And I think that within the reform of education, the point you made again in response to the Deputy Chair, if this legislation goes through, this legislation will be law before we have the reform of education report and guidance. Could you just, in your support of the bill, general support of the bill, maybe just make some comments on that?
Mairead, do you wanna answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, I think as the committee's already highlighted, there are a number of concerns with the wording and the articulation of the bill. And I think, as has already been noted in the earlier session as well, Kelly Armstrong has already noted the concerns around the use of the word promote. We do have to obviously bear in mind the various definitions that are, as Pat has already said, and as you're referring to as well, Robin, have been omitted from the bill itself. So that is obviously the purpose of the committee sessions and the scrutiny that you're applying to the bill. So those areas can be addressed. And it is very much the case that we are where we are, as you say, Robin. And it's very much the case that the bill as is, obviously there's a number of issues that need to be addressed with it. But it is a direction of travel. And the fact that has already been raised with the committee in previous sessions as well and by ourselves, the fact that parental choice is key in how they want their children educated. And it's very important that children and young people have a voice in that as well. And we know the various surveys that have been issued in previous years around the desire on the part of parents, children and young people to be integrated and to be educated together is obviously there. That's been evidenced a number of times in various research papers and surveys. So it is very much about accepting that this is a direction of travel. We live in a divided society, there is segregation, and we do want to move towards a more normalised society. And as Koulla said, it's very much about respecting the identity of all. This is not about respecting one sector over or to the cost of another. This is actually about making sure that we make room for all. So it's not an either or, it's actually about inclusion. It's about respect for identity. And that's fundamentally in terms of respecting the rights of children and young people to be educated together as well.
That's almost 4 minutes, Robin, if you want to ask a final question. Thanks.
Yes, Chair, thank you. I'll be very quick. And I recognise that part of the Commissioner's role is to encourage and facilitate integrated education. Just two things. In terms of your support for shared education and that particular initiative, and then how would you respond to the comments by CCMS, Mr. Gerry Campbell, who indicated that if this bill became law, we would be creating for their system a two-tier system?
So,
their sector, sorry, their two-tier.
Can I just quickly go back to the review of education? The review of education will not be reporting for 18 months because it's a big job. We will then have several years, I would imagine, based on previous history of discussion around review and implementation. I think it's unfair to expect this bill to be delayed whilst we spend what is likely to be years in reviewing and reforming our education system. My support of shared education is on the basis that it's a journey towards a fully integrated system. That's where my support for shared education has come from. My belief is shared education is not an end in itself. It's a road. It's a road to somewhere. CCMS, I appreciate the duty that's being placed here on CCMS as a statutory education body, and I understand the difficulties. But I think to reiterate what Mairead has just said and what I have just said, it's about how we have the right system in place for the children of that community. So I think this may be one of the amendments that you might want to consider. But I suppose for me, this isn't about I don't know how to say it without being offensive, but this isn't about what other sectors feel. This is about one sector that hasn't been given the support that it should have, that has had a piece of legislation since 1989 that hasn't been given full effect, and trying to level that playing field a little bit is the best way I can answer that question, Robin.
Okay.
Thank the Commissioner and Mairead, and thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Robin. Daniel McCrossan, MLA, please. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Mairead, you're most welcome back to committee, and thank you very much for your presentations, for answering questions so far. I'll go straight to it. You suggest that demand for integrated education outstrips supply. While this is true in a number of instances, the official figures given to this committee tell us that 82.2% of integrated primary schools were undersubscribed in 2020-21. Similarly, 75% of integrated post-primary schools were undersubscribed as well. Were you aware of this and these figures, and how do you see your comments supporting Clause 7, which presumes all new schools integrated, all new schools, integrated schools, should be integrated schools in light of these facts?
So that I wasn't aware of the undersubscription. Bearing in mind, though, that the Department of Education's statistics for the 2021 year show that in primary integrated, 12.4% of places in schools were unfilled, compared to in primary non-integrated, 19.4% of places unfilled. In post-primary integrated, 10.3% were unfilled, compared with post-primary non-integrated, 14.7% unfilled, Daniel. So I suppose my question to you around undersubscription is, what is the level of undersubscription in the other sectors? If we're going to compare, we need to compare like with like, because what I've got from the year 2021, the last academic year, is that integrated has less unfilled places than non-integrated. So we can band these statistics. So that's the evidence. So that's my response would be what we're hearing, what we've seen, and I heard what CCMS said about the lucid poll talk earlier this year around the general support for integrated, but the department's figures show me that there's still a significant demand for integration. So I suppose that's what my response would be to that question.
There's no doubt that there is demand, but given that this is a relatively new sector compared to that of the other sectors that have been around for a lot longer, why isn't this sector buzzing? Why isn't it showing the level of demand that is being reflected or presumed by this bill? Because the undersubscription doesn't suggest that.
Well, but the unfilled places does. And could it be that because the 1989 legislation to facilitate and encourage hasn't properly been implemented, that could be that the battle to have integrate, it's been an uphill battle for the proponents of integration, but we're seeing a sea change. So that's why we support the bill, Daniel, is because that sector has been the Cinderella for too long, and we haven't given full effect to the 89 legislation or the duty outlined in the Good Friday Agreement to facilitate and encourage. And I think that's why the promote needs to go in there. Parents won't send their children there if they don't want them to go there. What people are saying, what polls are saying, what statistics are showing us is that there is a demand, and if they had the option, parents would choose that one.
Yeah, I appreciate your answer, but I'll still stick with the worrying 82% figure. It is quite stark. Just if Chair, you indulge me slightly, in the submission you say that Article 29 of the UNCRC is of particular relevance to the provision of integrated education. But don't you think that all our schools promote preparing children for a responsible life in a free society in a spirit of understanding, peace, tolerance, equality of gender and friendship? Do you not think that that's the case in all of our schools? Because certainly from CCMS this morning, that's the message that I would get.
I think the evidence is you've picked one section of Article 29, and that's fair enough. But I think the clear evidence for me, and I will say that our Northern Ireland's education system as a whole does not meet the requirements of Article 29. I think there are schools in every single sector in Northern Ireland that can stand up and stand proud that they do. And I will accept that, but uniformly, no, I do not think that every school in every sector meets the requirements of Article 29. And generally, I don't think our education system does as a whole either.
Okay. And similarly, does all our schools not...
5 minutes, Donal. You can make that their final question, please. Thanks.
Similarly, Koulla, does all our schools not seek the development, and again I'll quote this, the development of children's personalities, talents and mental and physical abilities? And why have you singled out the integrated sector for these particular comments? Do you think that this would
sorry.
sector for schools?
I haven't singled out this sector. What I have said is that any clause in any legislation that talks about the purpose of the school sector in this bill, the integrated education sector, should include Article 29. If we were having a discussion about reform of CCMS legislation, I would be making the very same submission to you.
Okay.
Yeah, but Koulla, just to clarify, I've taken this from what you've said. You've said that this is of particular relevance to the provision of integrated education. So I'm thinking back to what you've said in your submission.
Absolutely, because of what I've said about bringing children together and supporting children to celebrate each other and to celebrate who they are. And that is of particular relevance to Article 29, particularly with regards. I do think the integrated sector or school with an integrated ethos absolutely does that more easily and more smoothly than in some other sectors. In some schools, in some other sectors, Daniel, I stand by that.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Starting to wonder why you voted to let this bill pass the committee stage, Daniel, but we'll come back to that on another day. Okay, Robbie.
Important to challenge some of these things.
Robbie, well, there's challenging, and then there's just disagreeing with the principles of the bill, it seems. But okay, Robbie Butler, MLA, please. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Chair. Hello, Koulla, and hello, Mairead. Could you guys give me, and I've asked this probably of the bill sponsor and nice and different people have been in, what is your understanding, what is your very basic understanding of what, if you're talking to a parent, what is integrated education, literally in 10 seconds? What's the purpose of integrated education? Without getting into explaining why you'd say it.
Feel free to take longer than 10 seconds.
No, don't seriously. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's obviously in clause 2 of the bill it's set out in terms of what integrated education should look at, but it's very much about integrating our children together, inclusive rather than regardless of identity.
Okay,
so it's
I'm going to jump in because I agree with you. Integrated education should be about educating our children together. However, every time we come round to this point, and to be fair to Koulla said, well, actually, it's not about maybe busing. You didn't use the word busing, but you did say it's not about. So either it's about educating our children together, or it's not, or it's about the ethos. So I think we talk around the houses sometimes about what integrated education means to parents, to pupils, or to educators, and so on. I think we'll need to bottom this out because it's one of the issues that we face. And Koulla, you covered it well. It's not so much the school; it's how we live. We live in segregated societies. Are we actually talking about busing pupils? And if we're not, then we're not going to educate our children together, because we will not move out of where
Robbie, you do realise we bus pupils across the length and breadth of Northern Ireland.
Yeah. So therefore, and that's brilliant. And that's what it's about. That's what integrated education should be about. I'll give you an example.
I'm not saying busing pupils across Northern Ireland.
Data received from the department reveals that almost 3/4 of integrated schools had a religious breakdown of pupils that fell below the threshold of 30% of pupils from a minority community. Okay, so if integrated schools as they're sitting today don't meet a threshold of educating our children together, when we already do busing, Chair, to be fair, okay? So if integrated schools today aren't necessarily doing what we think integrated schools should do, and I am in favour of educating our children together, so how do we deal with that in this bill? Does this bill deal with that? I don't think it does. And secondly, and this is the final one, Koulla, maybe for you to pick up, A single education system. Does this bill move us closer towards a single education system, or does it further segment an already sectorised system? Thank you.
Mairead, do you want to jump in, and then I'll talk about single education?
I mean, I appreciate the points that you're making, Robbie, but I think we have to recognise the context of Northern Ireland and how we are where we are today. So it's slightly unfair, given that the integrated education sector has only been in existence since 1981, to expect it to have achieved, the proportionality that you're talking about as well in terms of its aims. It is very important to recognise, and I think people have said this already, it is a direction of travel, not just in education, but across our whole society in terms of how we live together in this shared space. And it's very much the case that if we start, obviously we keep talking about earlier intervention, and we want to make sure that our children are exposed to children of all kinds of cultural backgrounds and identities, not just as we tend to get caught up with, given the historical evolution of Northern Ireland with the Catholic and Protestant community. But it's very much about having that inclusive approach. And yes, we don't want it to be artificial. And the fact that it was parents that started the first integrated school is a key point here, because it was very much about parents and children saying we want to be educated together, we want to live together, we want to end the segregation that has been a bane in our lives and across the society for so many years. So it is very much about recognising this as a direction of travel. We haven't arrived there yet in terms of the journey, as people say. I don't like using cliches, but that is part of it. So it is very much about recognising it as such. I think Koulla wants to come in here.
So just in answer to your question, will this bill take us further closer to a single education sector? I think it does. I think, like I said earlier, I think the lack of promotion has meant that's why it's not grown in the way it should have. And I just want to say, whether we like it or not, Northern Ireland's education system is riven with sectoral interests and divisions, and we need to find and I'm not saying CCMS or EA or NICE or whoever does not have the best interests of children at its heart. I absolutely think they do, and I know they do because I've had those conversations with them. Of course they do. What I'm saying is there is this undertone of sectoral interest, and we need to remove that. Now, whether we think integrated, we're just propping up another sector, I think is something to be debated and to be discussed. But I do believe an integrated ethos is absolutely will bring us closer. And I look forward to the day when we don't have maintained, controlled, integrated in the future, and we just have one system where the local school in that community, as I've said, is the best school for that community's child, and that's where they send their children. Integration isn't going to remove divisions in our society.
I agree with you totally, Koulla. So thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mairead.
Great help. Thanks, Robbie. Robbie, there are obviously statements of principles available in terms of like wider definition, but the NICE statement of principles is one that you can refer to in terms of definition there. I'll not read it out because we're way over time. Thanks for that.
I have read it, Chair, so thank you.
Okay. Well, in that case, then it points to mixed pupils, mixed staff, mixed board of governors, mixed pupils. That's obviously slightly different to some schools.
And some of them are failing to hit it, but that's for different reasons, and I get that. That's grand.
Yeah, but the comparator of the mixed nature of the school is starkly different to the non-mixed nature of lots of other schools. But here, you can continue somewhere else. Okay.
I do get that, Chair. We can pick that up, sure, offline.
Okay. Diane Dodds, MLA, please. Thanks.
Hello to everyone, and thank you for your contributions so far. Koulla, I wrote this down. You said that the bill does not elevate one section or sector over another. How do you justify that in light of the for example, 5(1)(a) that the bill would ensure there's a duty to increase demand for the provision of integrated education. 4.1 that the department would have the duty to encourage, facilitate and promote, something it doesn't have to do with any other sector. And how would you convince other sectors in education that this was not promoting one sector over another?
I suppose it goes back to what I said at the beginning, where we're at with the starting point. If we, as I say, agree that we want to educate our children together, not in a melting pot, like I said, this is about the ethos of education for me. This is not about. So we agree that integrated is coming from further back. Whether the department overtly promotes other sectors or not is not the issue. The fact is, children, the integrated education has not enjoyed the focus, the investment, the promotion that other sectors have, formally or not. I think other sectors don't have anything to fear from this bill if they're confident in the quality of education that they're giving the children. I also think that, I think it would be interesting. It talks about the action plan later on. So what that promotion looks like. And I understand, we can't have the department saying, don't send your child to that school, send your child to this school. But it's how it helps parents understand and children understand what goes on in integrated school, helps them see that as a viable choice for their children in their communities. So I do stand by my belief that this doesn't unduly advantage the integrated sector, bearing in mind my belief that it has been unduly disadvantaged over the last 40 years. So I think it levels the playing field.
Yeah, and I'm going to come back to you by saying that is probably something that the committee can't take, because this is your belief, or it doesn't unduly or whatever. Yeah. What we're actually going to vote on and write is law, which can be legally enforced and judicially reviewed. So therefore, we have to be absolutely clear about what we're doing. So there's no point in saying, oh no, it doesn't really matter if every new school has to be an integrated school, because sure, we're not opening new schools anyway. No, that's not the point. It's the law we're writing. Yeah. And that is where I think this bill will come into conflict with a lot and raises a huge number of issues. I just want to ask one other question, because I went to a local grammar school here in Banbridge. My children went to a local grammar school. That was my choice. But it was also my choice, not just academically, but it was also my choice because that local grammar school is a very well integrated school. Do you believe, really? I mean, you've given that impression today, that the only schools who will teach respect for other traditions, etc., are integrated schools? Because I think if I didn't know anything else, I might take that out of today's evidence.
Right. Well, just to thank you for giving me the opportunity to clarify. I don't think I said that I thought only integrated schools celebrated cultures equally and gave the space for to celebrate cultures. I don't believe that's what I said. Well, it's certainly not what I meant. It may have come across that way. I think what I said was that what I meant to say was schools across every sector do, of course, celebrate cultures. However, and the ethos of schools varies across all sectors. Integrated schools, the ones who do it well, have an obligation to ensure that children are able to follow whatever their religion, so that they can be whatever religion they choose to be, or none if they choose none. And I think that's what I'm talking about. I am not for 1 minute suggesting that there are not many schools in other sectors who do not encourage respect, particularly those who take part in shared education. I am not saying that. What I'm saying is, it's not consistent. It's not. The quality isn't consistent, and it's not always embedded in the ethos of the school. And that's what I'm saying. In an integrated situation, in an integrated school, that should be one of the core ethos that they have, and it allows for that opportunity. So you can have a controlled school that does celebrate the cultures of others, but nevertheless, the services in that school are run by the Catholic Church, because it's deemed to be a Catholic school. So those children are not having their culture celebrated in the routine religious observances that happens in that school. Now, parents who send their children there know that. I'm not saying they don't. They know that, but it doesn't feel very inclusive for them. So I do not want you to think that I'm suggesting schools don't teach respect. Of course they do. But the quality and teaching respect and living it are sometimes two different things, and we need to ensure that happens in every school.
Okay.
Can I just add very, very quickly there? I wrote down.
7 minutes, by the way, Diane, just so you know.
No. Lots of other people have had more time. I wrote down exactly what you said, Koulla, which was that an integrated ethos does this more easily than any of the other sectors. I'm pretty sure many of the other sectors would disagree with you.
I said an integrated. So, sorry, Chris. No, sorry, Chris. I have to just. Does it more easily? I stand over that. I absolutely stand over that. And I'm not saying other sectors don't do it, but an integrated ethos does do it more easily. Thank you for clarifying that.
Okay. Dan, you definitely got longer than anyone else there. That's my generosity.
She asked interesting questions.
Yeah, she did. I suppose, in the context of that stuff, it kind of brought to mind Peter Robinson's term that our education system is a benign apartheid. But I'll move us on. Nicola Brogan, MLA, please. Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. And hello, Koulla and Mairead. Thanks so much for coming along here this afternoon. Koulla and Mairead, I agree with most of what you say normally. Today I'm going to have to disagree. And there's lots of what you said today I do agree with as well. But around the use of the word promote, this last number of weeks we've been hearing evidence from lots of different sectors. We have delved into this here, Bill, and the things that keep coming back to us is the use of the word promote and the clause 7, the presumption that all new schools would be integrated schools. And there are huge flaws with that, there's no denying it. In fact, the sponsor, Kelly Armstrong, has acknowledged, especially with those two specifically, that there are major factors or major issues with that there. And Koulla, I take on your point that you see a need for the word promote for integrated education, because integrated education has been kind of left behind in the past and needs that there kind of elevation. But one example that just pops into my head straight away is the Irish medium sector. And so why should integrated education be elevated above that there? Never mind the other sectors. I think that's wholly unfair. And at what stage, where do you stop to then? Do you bring Irish medium education under the same level, and then are they competing with each other? Do you know what I mean? So I think that's one reason why I can't agree with you in that there at all. And going back to the point that Diane has made about the presumption of all new schools being integrated, and because Kelly Armstrong has said this a few times too, that new schools aren't being built in the north, we're going to put this into law. So we can't just work on that there premise. I don't want to put my name to that there, because that will be there forever, or forever long that law lasts. So I can't agree with that. But I do think that we need to look at how we can support families and parents and whoever wants, and children who want to be educated in the integrated sector. And I think we should be looking at ways of doing that. So maybe can you suggest, or have you thought about other ways other than using the word promote, for us to do that, to meet the demand that's there for the integrated education? Because the demand is there. We need to, I think, first of all, need to have it measured right, and then find ways to support it properly, but without elevating that over other sectors.
Yeah, go ahead, Mairead.
I mean, you've said it yourself, Nicola. Obviously, there's some of the wording in the bill and the articulation of it and the aims of it are something that's Kelly's already looking at, and yourselves are already looking at in terms of the scrutiny of the bill. I'd just like to, this word promote, obviously there are other words that can be used that would be supportive of integrated education, and we have since the 89 order, we have had the encourage and facilitate words used, and that hasn't resulted in the support that should have been provided to the integrated education sector, or indeed the Irish medium sector, as you say. Just to go back to the word promote, and a lot of this, and obviously the work of Nikki goes back to what the UN committee will say. And in their concluding observations back in 2016 at paragraph 72E, it actually calls for active promotion of an integrated education system. And I go back to the point that was made earlier as well. The integrated ethos isn't just about the children, it's about the whole makeup of the school community. And that obviously goes back to the boards of governors, the teaching staff, the ancillary staff, and all the supportive staff in the school as well. And they have used the word promote. Now, obviously, as you've already pointed out, that can create a difficulty in terms of putting this into law and what that looks like in practice. So I don't think it's beyond the legislators like yourselves to actually come up with a word that is as appropriate and doesn't get into the difficulties that you've already outlined and others have outlined as well. Does that answer your question, Nicola? I know Koulla wants to come in here as well.
Well, it does an extent, Mairead, but we can change the wording of it. But if it's going to mean the same thing, and if it's going to, if it's still going to elevate that sector over another, I don't know.
I don't think you do. Sorry, go ahead, Koulla.
I think in the regulations, it talks about regulations. There's two things I think that will happen in the regulations. One is a clearer definition of actions that promote. Yeah. And secondly, under clause 7, it does allow for special circumstances. Yeah. Where a school won't be, and I think for definition of what these terms mean, I think that's where the way forward is. I'm a big fan of promote. Mairead says we can't find an alternative word. Promote is in Nikki's legislation. I do want to say something about the Irish language sector, and I know I've talked a lot about one sector. I absolutely agree that we're probably going to be talking about two sectors, because we have to allow for the provision of children, parents and children choosing to be taught in the medium of the Irish language. So I will concede when we talk about a single system, we are probably going to be talking about 2, possibly 3. I don't know if Ulster Scots will open schools, but we have to allow for children to be taught in the language of their choice when it comes to Irish language. So I'm not looking. I on reading the bill didn't see elevation. I just saw a more level playing field.
I'm going to have to bring us to a close there, Nicola. Sorry, you want to make a final comment?
Chris, yeah, no, I understand that, Koulla, and I suppose it's not until you get into the thick of it do you see that there, that how that can affect other sectors. And just finally on your point about clause 7 and the special circumstances, I agree with you there too. I think that needs to be clarified, and before we pass anything, we need to have that clarification. But listen, thanks to both of you so much. It's really interesting to talk to you all the time. So thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. We do, of course, have an integrated Irish medium school in East Belfast. I'm glad to say. Okay.
East Belfast always ahead of the game.
Mairead, thank you so much indeed. We really appreciate your written and oral evidence that will give full consideration as part of the committee stage of the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, members, that allows us to move to agenda item 10, which is our oral briefing from the Transfer Representatives Council. Can I refer members to the Transfer Representatives Council response to the committee's call for evidence on page 365 and give a very warm welcome to Dr. Andrew Brown, Vice Chair of the Transfers Representative Council, Presbyterian Church in Ireland, Dr. Peter Hamill, Education Officer at the Church of Ireland, Karen Jardine, Public Affairs Officer, Presbyterian Church of Ireland, and Dr. Anita Gracie, Board of Education Member, the Methodist Church in Ireland. Folks, you're very welcome today. Apologies for the delay, and I'd be glad to give you up to 10 minutes to make your opening statement before we take questions from members. Thank you.
Chair, thank you very much. I obviously on my screen I can't see whether I'm being seen by everyone else. Could you confirm that I am?
You are.
Listen,
thank you.
thank you very much. And I want to thank you for inviting us to come and speak to the committee today and to give our views and opinions on this bill. And it's very important that we feel that we do. So I'm going to let my colleagues, and you've already introduced them, speak as part of this as well. And I'm just going to top and tail it. But so the first thing we want to say is to thank you. It's important that we're here. Just to give folks a tiny little bit of background, and I'm sorry because I don't mean to teach my grannies how to suck eggs, because you know the education sector as well as anyone in Northern Ireland, but you'll know that we have been involved as the Presbyterian Church, the Church of Ireland and the Methodist Church together under the umbrella of the Transfer Representatives Council. We have been involved in education for a decade in Northern Ireland. We transferred over to the control of the state our schools, and when the state of Northern Ireland was formed, and so Presbyterian, Methodist and Church of Ireland schools were transferred to the control of the state, and in so doing then the churches have retained a degree of influence and involvement and over and within the education sector. And so transfer representatives sit on boards of governors, transfer representatives are regularly consulted, and transfer representatives sit on various other education bodies in the education system. And TRC as a body itself has been around for 35 to 40 years, and we are essentially the policy making arm of those three denominations within education. One of the things that's hugely important for us is that when we transferred to the control of the state, our schools, there was a quid pro quo. Not only did we get to sit on boards and have influence, but we didn't just transfer buildings, we transferred pupils and staff over to the control of the state. And we did that in the understanding that the Christian ethos and the values of a non-denominational Christian ethos, which are so incredibly important within the controlled sector, and indeed are important and are stated in the three major sectors in Northern Ireland's system, is promoted and maintained and defended in perpetuity. And so that's really why we're here today. And again, our thanks. And I want to hand over first of all to my colleague Anita from the Methodist Church, who's going to give you some information.
Thanks, Andy. Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your invitation to speak here today. Just to say from the outset, I really have two main points to make. And the first is that from the outset, the TRC and our constituent churches are by no means against integrated education. We, in fact, are very much in favour of educating the whole community together. And that's why our controlled schools in areas of high levels of ethnic and cultural diversity have become the most diverse school communities of any sector. The example very often given being Methodist College in Belfast, which has always had high numbers for a very long time of pupils from all Christian denominations, as well as from all faiths and none. Or a more recent one of Fane Street, whose majority religion is currently Islam. And in fact, controlled schools educate at least 30% of all newcomer students in Northern Ireland. So we would just use these facts to highlight the idea that has been given, or the perception that is out there at the moment, particularly within the debate around this issue, that controlled schools are the preserve of the Protestant community. With Protestant involvement in schools in all areas and in all aspects and roles down at about 63.4%, a figure from 2018. Our schools are open to pupils from all denominations of Christianities, and our teaching staffs in both teaching roles and non-teaching roles are also include many who are not from the Protestant community. And this number continues to grow because we have no barriers. We don't use any selection form that includes an applicant's religion or faith or adherence or church membership or church attendance or anything like that. So that is growing exponentially. Also, if we look at controlled schools of different types that were set up because of need, for example, nursery schools, for example, special schools, they weren't set up denominationally, as you know, and so they are within our fold as well. And that is places and examples of where integration has just occurred naturally, and they follow the needs and the makeup of the community, which is what we would like to do and what we would like to see naturally, rather than artificially putting together targets for denominational percentages, which might in the future entail the busing of pupils from one community over into another in order to hit these targets. So my second point then is about parental choice and parental pressure, which is demanding more integrated schooling. And as I said, we don't oppose that at all. However, we can also see in this bill the hand of those wanting to remove the option of a faith-based school ethos from children who want their children, from parents who want their children to be educated within such an ethos. And this is actually a right. It's enshrined within human rights standards, such as the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And in countries like England and Wales, for example, there's a far wider diversity of schools, with state schools, the option for parents of sending their children to state schools or faith schools of various denominations and faith, all of which, though, are diverse in their own makeup. But their values and their ethos is very much in keeping with their churches or their faith organization who has set them up. So we would suggest that the most inclusive and egalitarian thing to do is to have a variety of different models of schools, which can be chosen depending on their ethos by parents to reflect the ethos with which they identify, including a faith-based ethos for those who want that.
Anita, thank you very much. Chair, I'm going to ask Peter if he would speak now.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chair. Apologies, I have building work going on in the house. That's why I look like I'm landing a plane. Can you hear me all right?
Yes. That's
okay. That's grand. Sorry. And they cut the power about 10 minutes ago, which was complete panic when I had to reset the internet. So I would just like to reinforce what Anita said, and I appreciate that the committee has been hearing all morning, and also that you have been a lot of these points you've already heard before, but I think we would just like to reinforce what has been already been said. We are concerned about the timing of this bill and the independent review of education, reviewing the whole education system and attempting to create a plan for us all to embrace. And we are concerned that this bill interferes with that and possibly puts one sector above another, or one particular type of school above another. We're also concerned about the resource factor, that resources will be focused on one type of school, and this we feel will be detrimental to existing schools. We certainly believe that funds should be spread equitably, and I use that carefully, and say across the education system, focused on supporting the children first, and on the children in need first, and not favouring one particular type or sector of school. We need to improve our education system, as has been said this morning, and not divert funding in favour of one particular type or flavour of school. We do have an area planning system already in place, maybe not perfect, but the relevant stakeholders do all work well together. Everybody has a voice at that table, and that's very positive. But our concern is that this bill may disrupt that area planning process, and although not intended, we are concerned that it may actually divide and cause problems rather than enhance and have a positive way forward. We don't feel that area planning should be tied to one particular type of solution. And I think those are my points that I'm going to make this morning. Thank you.
Peter, thank you very much for that. And Karen is going to address the committee now, Chair.
Chair, I'd like just to raise a couple of issues, and the first one's around the definitions used in the first couple of clauses. But just to clarify, I think whenever Andy spoke at the start, he mentioned churches being involved over the last decade. I think he meant century.
Yes, my apologies.
Just to get that on the record. But just looking at clauses 1 and 2, the suggested definition that's included there borrows really heavily from the wording used to define the purpose of shared education in the Shared Education Act in 2016. And I suppose it's unclear to us how, if that already exists in legislation, then how is that helpful, or why is it necessary to duplicate in that way? And Anita's already referred to the Christian ethos and character, which is important to us as churches, and that's actually part of the integrated ethos as well, and continues to be part of the definition used by NICE in its Statement of Principles document. That's not actually mentioned in the clauses in terms of the definition of integrated education, and that's just something that we'd like to raise. And then there seems to be some contradiction really between Clause 1 and Clause 7. So Clause 1 gives a definition of integrated education about including reasonable numbers of both Protestant and Roman Catholic children or young persons, but yet in Clause 7, there's been a lot of talk about the presumption that a new school will be an integrated school, but it says that the religious demographics of any area shouldn't really be taken into account. So what does an integrated school look like in a single identity residential setting? Could there be an unintended consequence that this legislation actually dilutes the nature and character of integrated ethos and education? And if you could indulge me just for a moment, Chair, I want to make just a general comment about private members' legislation, and I think it reflects some of the earlier conversation that the committee had before it started into its evidence sessions today. I think the ability and tenacity of individual members to bring forward their own bills is one of the strengths of our legislature. But I think it's in the current mandate, it's become increasingly prevalent for individuals to bring forward legislative proposals like this one that are significant in their scope and their reach. But despite that, there doesn't appear to be an obligation on an MLA, and I'm not just talking about this bill, it's happening in other bills as well. There doesn't seem to be any obligation to provide information on what consultation they've undertaken. Yes, there's the explanatory and financial memorandum, but you can just say a line to say that we've consulted. MLA doesn't have to say how they've developed their proposals or which organisations or individuals have been consulted. So a couple of the issues that have been raised, talked about lots today around wording of promotion, presumption, maybe that could have been picked up through an earlier consultation phase if sectoral bodies, the churches had been engaged with at an earlier stage. It places a really big burden on the committee, especially given the unique circumstances of this mandate. I suppose by contrast, government departments, they have to engage in a number of consultation exercises throughout the policy development and legislative drafting, and they have a specified list of consultees representative of all Section 75 categories. So I want to ask, not wanting to overburden individual MLAs and seeking to provide or to bring forward private members' bills, but might the committee consider approaching the Committee on Procedures with a request for the review of how private members' bills are developed, and specifically around the requirements to consult and how information and consultation exercises is provided? Thank you.
And thank you, Karen. And Chair, apologies for the slip of my tongue earlier when I should have said that we were involved and have been involved for the last century since we transferred our schools over to the control of the state at the outset of the state. And that really concludes our opening statement. But I just want to conclude that opening statement by wishing you all the best, Chris. We understand that you're stepping down. You've been a great leader of this committee with an obvious passion for education, and we want to wish you all the very, very best in the future. And so we're looking forward now to getting into a bit of back and forth with your colleagues and yourself. Should there be any questions, we do also understand that we're all that stands between you and your lunch.
I can't ask any difficult questions of you now after that.
I'm sure the buttering is really going to stop you.
Thanks for those kind words. Keen to bring members in for you now to engage with you. I'll try to avoid asking questions. I suppose maybe just make two points. The proposer of the bill has addressed this matter and can address this matter, but in terms of the bill aiming to remove the option of faith-based ethos schools, it's pretty much impossible to do that, and nor is that the intention, given that all schools in Northern Ireland are non-denominationally Christian. So I think it is worth me emphasising that is not the intention. In terms of consultation, I think it's worth us heeding that feedback, and there is a review of private members' bills. I think insofar as MLAs need to take responsibility for how they do consultation, I think us as citizens and as key stakeholders need to take responsibility for how we respond to consultations as well. And you know, the process can move promptly at times, and you need to get in there. You need to make your voices heard, which is hopefully what the committee has done to facilitate in its committee stage in relation to this particular bill. Can I bring in Pat Sheehan, MLA, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Excuse me, and thanks to all of you for coming along to the committee today. I'll try to be brief because I know we are fairly short of time. And a lot has been said about ethos, and again, Andy, you raised it there with Chris, and I agree with Chris's assessment that there's no attempt as part of this bill to remove the Christian ethos from schools here. But could you explain to the committee what you see as the difference, if any, between the schools you represent, or the ethos in the schools you represent, and the ethos in the integrated sector at the moment? Thanks.
Well, I mean, when the Principle of Statement Charters for the integrated sector was written in 1989, it very clearly said that the integrated sector was based on Christian values, as is the controlled sector and as is the maintained sector. And so, as the chair and indeed you have said, Pat, thank you for saying it, both of you, you know, schools in Northern Ireland are based on non-denominational Christian values. But it is the fact that in the bill that is glaringly omitted, and that concerns us. Does that answer your question?
Well, no, because I mean, what I'm asking you is currently, in terms of the ethos in the schools that you represent. So, for example, Anita mentioned Methody there. You know, what would the difference be between the ethos in Methody and the ethos in an integrated school?
Well, I'll speak about the ethos that there are in controlled schools. You'll understand, Pat, that as we come in here today, you know, we represent the interests of the churches within the controlled sector, and the overarching ethos statement for controlled schools is the support of high quality education for children and young people from all faiths and none, to enable them to learn, develop and grow together within the ethos of non-denominational Christian values and principles. Now, my understanding is that the integrated sector, as it stands under its Statement of Principle Charter, has also said that it is founded upon non-denominational Christian values.
Can I just come in there as well? I suppose things that have been talked about diversity, inclusivity, tolerance, equality, you know, compassion for one another, care for one another in the school community are all the ethos to which we ascribe to and aspire. And in that sense, there isn't that much difference between them. And Anita, I think, helpfully outlined just the nature of the diversity that is within the controlled sector as well, and how I think one of the things that we haven't mentioned is around shared education, and actually the value and the opportunities that has provided for children and young people to mix and to get to know each other and that sort of thing. I think sometimes we hear commentary in the media of people perhaps of our generations who say, didn't ever meet anybody from the other religion until I went to work or I went to university or I went to college. I don't think that's necessarily the same story for our children and young people today. And I suppose sometimes there's a risk of legislating on our own experience rather than the experience of what was kind of coming through and as evidenced through various reports in relation to shared education.
I think that's really helpful, Karen. And I think one of the other things, Pat, I mean, if you look at clause 1.2, where it suggests that an integrated school is a school which intentionally promotes, protects and improves an ethos of diversity, respect and understanding between those of different cultures, religious beliefs and none, etc. I mean, for us, we see that defines what a controlled school is currently. in Northern Ireland, and it does that under the cornerstone values, as Karen has said, the cornerstone Christian values of tolerance and respect and duty and obedience. And I could go on all day about those.
Yeah, and I'm sure the CCMS who were in before would also agree that their sector promotes the same. Okay, yep. And just, Chris, have I time for another quick one? You're on mute.
Final quick one, Pat.
Not again.
Final quick one, thanks.
Okay. Just in terms, Andy, of the demand for integrated education, and you suggest in your written briefing that there should be an audit done, an audit of demand through the area planning process. Could you explain briefly how that would be done?
Well, I'm going to pass over to whichever of my colleagues wants to pick up on this, because Peter, Karen and Anita all sit on different area planning organisations and committees within Northern Ireland. So whichever one of you guys wants to pick up on that one.
It looks like it's me. I would say, Pat, I think an audit just has to be an audit of specific areas. I think that's where that needs to take place. I think the problem with audits is you can always ask you can ask the question in whatever way you want to ask the question. I think we need to be clear and say what type of education do people want. And I think that some reports would say that parents go for the best education for their children, and that's what we need to look for, and not necessarily just a specific of which type of school would you like to take your child to. So I would hope an audit could be done through area planning.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay. Thanks for that, Peter. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks. Can I bring in Robin Newton, MLA, please?
Thank you, Chair, and can I welcome Dr. Brown, Dr. Hamill and Dr. Gracie, and extend a friendly welcome, particularly to Karen. I think the Assembly's loss is a Presbyterian Church's gain, so thank you. It's good to see Karen again. Members of the committee are hearing me saying this, but my wife and I chose for our family Methodist College because we believed it was an integrated school, truly integrated school, offering all the best choices in that field. Can I maybe ask the members, and really from CCMS evidence, they indicated that they felt if this bill was to proceed, that indeed there might be a two-tier system, one system being favoured. So could I perhaps ask the members of the committee in whatever way they feel to make some comment about their paragraph 4 in their response, paragraph 5 in their response, and indeed paragraph 9 in their response?
Robin, thank you very much, and thank you for your warm welcome. And indeed, Karen's joining us did very much become our gain, so we appreciate the comments that you've made. We have suggested that the bill has the potential to create an uneven playing field. I think we already find this in Northern Ireland, and I think we very much find it within the controlled sector. I mean, if one looks at the fact that nursery schools in areas are integrated schools, that special schools in areas are integrated schools, and incidentally they fall under the controlled sector. And yet I'm hearing time and time again from colleagues where a new development proposal is put in for another nursery school in an area when one is not needed. I'm hearing from colleagues in controlled schools where there seems to be pressure on schools. Now, I'm not saying where that pressure is coming from or who it's being applied to. I'm just saying that there at times different sorts of pressures coming in to transform to integrated status because, and this is what I'm hearing from colleagues, because of the financial incentives in so doing. That undermines the sectors that are already there. Colleagues within the nursery sector know that therefore any new money and any new capital spend is coming to a new school, which may not be necessary in an area. And we understand the facilitation of integrated education, but it's the promotion that we have an issue with. because we feel that it will be deleterious to the other sectors who are already cash strapped. And very often new schools are not required. What is required is refurbishment and capital expenditure on existing schools. I'll pass over to any of my colleagues who wish to comment on that.
If I come in just on the question on clause 6, Robin, that you'd asked, and thank you for your kind words earlier. I think probably just to echo what you heard from the CCMS and the Catholic trustees this morning, why would a school of a different ethos be required to promote, or a sectoral body with a different ethos be required to promote something that is not their ethos? And again, like we've talked a little bit about that in our conversation with Pat, in terms of what that ethos looks like, might be isn't actually that different. But in terms of asking, in our case, the Controlled Schools Support Council or CCMS to advocate and include provision and all those other things that it says in clause 6, that would actually go against their own kind of principles and their own operational policies and procedures as well. So I think it actually just creates a real clash in terms of that.
And Robin, you've mentioned paragraph 5 in our submission as well. If one looks at the aspirational numbers in the creation of an integrated school, where it under NICE's statement, it says that the aspiration is that this rises to 30%. And then I understand that there are figures of 40, 40 and 20. How can those things be achieved in an area where there is predominantly, maybe wholly or entirely, one section of the community living, as happens very often in areas of socioeconomic deprivation and disadvantage? Thank you for your questions. I hope that that's addressed them.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
Anita may wish to come in.
Right.
Keen to keep us moving on. Yeah, go ahead, Anita, briefly. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Just very briefly on that issue, I think you'll find that controlled schools have been extremely responsive to shifts in demographics. So I could give you the example again of Lurgan Model School, where the demographic over the years has just shifted. That's in the centre of Lurgan. And now the population in that controlled school, which continues to be controlled, is almost, I think it's certainly over 70% Catholic, and the school is very much involved and has brought in clergy, for example, to help prepare the pupils in RE lessons for the sacraments and that sort of thing. So we've shown, as Andy said, there's no necessity to convert a school to a different sector in order to be inclusive. That's what we, I think, are trying to say as well, that we can be integrated and we can be inclusive within our own ethos and within our own sector without having to build a new school, which again in an urban area may well be on a greenfield and may move the whole location of the school again, and then makes it a new school, which takes away from the schools which are struggling sometimes in areas like that to maintain numbers.
Okay, thank you. I assume my time's used up, Chair.
It is, Robin. You don't want to ask a final brief question? You've been pretty compliant most of the day.
I would only make the comment that I think you're making, which is the comments that you're making are very similar to CCMS and recognising, and you've said it in your paragraph 10, that TRC is concerned that clause 6 is unworkable. I think that would be echoed by CCMS without putting words in their mouth. And that each of the education bodies has its own ethos. And I think the point that Dr. Gracie was making at the end, where there is, and it's something I would encourage, and particularly I think the shared educational initiative from the executive is there is just too much, I think, Chair, stacking up from all of the evidence that we're receiving now against the workability of this bill, certainly in its present format. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks. Given that the points are being raised there in terms of, Karen had mentioned previously about the experience of this generation of children not being that you get to the end of your education pathway and not having interacted with people from a different background, and cases being made for inclusivity and natural integration. How do you respond to Ulster University research that seems to suggest that 7% of pupils in controlled schools are from a perceived Catholic background only, and 2% of pupils in Catholic and chain schools are from a perceived Protestant background only?
I don't know where they've got that information from. I mean, if you look at the latest statistics from the Controlled School Support Council, we're talking around 63%.
Right, which obviously includes a lot of integrated schools, though. But my understanding is the Ulster University research is non-integrated schools.
I mean, Peter has some stats on that, and I think the overall number falls from something small. Like Peter, you had the stats from this morning.
I picked up the stats this morning. I didn't actually take out. I'll be fair, I didn't take out the integrated schools. I took out the Irish medium and took out the. We looked at the difference with it. The figures don't change dramatically whenever you remove those other type of school within the control system.
I mean, I think essentially the fact of the matter is that controlled schools are open to those of all faiths and none. And it's very, very simple. And as Anita said earlier when she used her Lurgan example, the controlled schools are also fleet of foot, and they understand the demographics. You go up into schools in Rosetta, for instance, up in that area, and those schools are taking in pupils of all faiths and none, and that's happening throughout Northern Ireland.
I think so. It's Ulster University research. Maybe I could engage with you on that directly, given that it's not something that you recognise. But if it were 7% of pupils in non-integrated control schools are from a perceived Catholic background, would that be a concerning percentage for you if that is substantiated?
Well, again, I don't recognise those figures. I presume that's part of research that's done by Ulster University. Peter, if that's your building work, you might want to go on mute there, mate.
Sorry.
I'm assuming that may well be part of the research that Ulster University have been doing, that's been sponsored by the Integrated Education Fund. So, as I say, I don't recognise those statistics. I know that it's one of a series of pieces of research that desktop research that's been done by the centre there within the university.
Does the sponsor and the desktop reference nature to it take away from the veracity of it?
When you say the veracity, again, I don't recognise those figures. They don't resonate with me as to what the figures I have would suggest.
Okay, we'll move on. Can I bring in Daniel McCross at MLA, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to our guests. You're most welcome, and thank you for your opening remarks and for taking questions so far. A number of questions. I'll go straight to them so I can get them covered. You set out a number of concerns about how the bill could affect funding to schools and other sectors. Can you please elaborate on this and how you believe children might be affected? And also, are you concerned in relation to capital funding or recurrent funding?
Thank you, Daniel. I'll take this one, I guess, because I did mention it. I think our concerns are on both recurring funding and on capital funding. I think there's a perception out there for capital funding that integrated schools get priority with that. I'm not convinced necessarily that is the case, but it certainly is a perception there. I think that an ongoing funding would be the concern. If the Department of Education, who sort the funding, are having to give priority to integrated schools, there is a danger. And then the danger is that the funding goes towards integrated schools rather than the schools that need it, in terms of, and we know there are many of our school buildings not fit for purpose in Northern Ireland, and that would be the priority, rather than creating new schools that necessarily wouldn't put that. So if that makes sense, if that answers your question.
Yeah,
hopefully.
Yeah, Appreciate that. Thank you. When I touch on this, I notice also that you've alluded to NICE including Christian in character as part of its definition of an integrated school, but the bill sponsor has omitted any mention of this in this bill. Do you believe this is an admission that should be addressed in legislation, and if so, what would you propose be added to the bill?
Maybe if I take that, because that's one of the things that I had mentioned in my remarks. I don't know if, because they haven't not had the opportunity to talk to the bill sponsor about the bill, I'm not sure what the rationale is for that, and it may be because the NICE Statement of Principles already includes it. Maybe it was felt it wasn't necessary to put it onto the face of the bill, but I think that would be something for the committee to kind of explore further with the bill sponsor whenever they're back with you in the coming weeks.
Okay. So I'm just, was this brought up in any engagement you've had with the bill sponsor, or are you saying there has been? We
haven't had any engagement with the bill sponsor, and I suppose that goes back to reflect some of the comments I was making about consultation. As far as I'm aware, back in 2015-16, or in this most recent phase of the bill process, there hasn't been engagement with the churches or TRC on the bill.
From the outset, one of the main concerns I had, in order to inform this legislation, to ensure that there has been wider consultation, is to ensure that everyone was spoken with. We sought those clarifications and we were given reassurances that had happened. You're not the only body that has told us that hasn't happened. We've had other concerns raised as well, and we have shared concerns in relation to the lack of consultation around these matters, and it does raise considerable concerns or adds to them. Just following on, you tell us that Clause 6, which requires a range of educational bodies to include provision for integrated education or strategies, plans and policies to be unworkable. Why do you suggest this, and what effect specifically could Clause 6 have on the ethos and operations of schools in other sectors?
Again, maybe if I speak to that, just because I spoke to it earlier, and I suppose it's that sense of other educational bodies being asked to do things that aren't within their remit, and obviously if this legislation passes, it becomes within their remit, but actually I think creates a conflict of interest in terms of that, in terms of including provision for integrated education. And in the controlled sector, there are integrated schools within the controlled sector, but that's not their primary aim and their primary focus. Is actually diverting the sectoral bodies away from what their primary focus should be. And in the case of CSSE, that's about support for controlled schools, as its name suggests. And so I think you're placing unfair duties onto other sectoral bodies that then just becomes unwieldy and unworkable, as we have said.
Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. Here, just a final, very brief point. So, some people view the implementation of this bill as an important step towards a single education system. In your view, could this bill achieve that? And what is your vision for a single education system, and how do we move towards it?
Well, I think one of the points that we raised in our opening remarks was the fact that we stand on the cusp of an independent review of education, and we think that this bill is rather presumptive and preemptive. When that organisation, that independent review, hasn't started taking evidence yet. And I know that as a body, the TRC and indeed the churches are, as every education body is at the moment with this upcoming review, we're doing our own navel gazing on this. We're considering for ourselves what is our vision of education. And I can tell you that the Presbyterian Church is having a conference on the 29th of January. And if any of you are interested in attending, we would love to see you there, in which we will be looking at our future vision for the role of the churches within education in the 21st century and beyond. Daniel.
That's I've just noted that date there because I would be interested in just engaging with that, and thanks. Thank you all. Thank you.
Do you finish it? Okay, thanks. Can I bring in Diane Dodds, MLA, please? Thanks.
Good afternoon by now, I think it is probably, Chris, everybody, and thank you for your evidence so far. Could I ask you, what do you think Clause 6 would impose on schools that already isn't imposed? or expected?
Again, if I speak to that, and I suppose, as Anita has already mentioned, many of our schools are within the controlled sector are inclusive, do include a broad range of backgrounds, both in terms of our locality here and also different ethnic groups. I think it will provide, I think sometimes we have an expectation that schools will resolve all the ills of society, and that's an unrealistic expectation. Our teachers are there to provide high quality education to our children and young people to help prepare them for being out in the world. It's not the responsibility of schools to develop and adopt and implement and revise policies and strategies and plans to promote integrated education. And again, Clause 6 just provides this onerous burden on the sectoral bodies, and then through that to schools to do things that they're not actually designed to do or there to do.
Okay, thank you. I just think Clause 6. I'm not sure whether it means integrated education as a definition, or integrating children as a general aim. And I just think that the clause is unclear as to what it would do, and therefore will end up in confusion, is my sense of it. I don't know whether you agree with that or not, which it is. I just also want to pick up on your point about consultation, and the fact that this is a very major, and in fact both yourselves and CCMS have indicated a fairly radical piece of legislation, and as I understand it, there was no consultation in this prior to the introduction of this specific part of the bill, but that it relies on consultation from about 5-6 years ago. I think that's worth reminding everyone.
And I'm not sure even how that consultation happened 5 or 6 years ago, because we have no report of that consultation. We've no sense of who was spoken to at the time. And as far as I'm aware, and I might be wrong because we've all kind of come into this post that time, that the TRC wasn't approached, or the 3 churches that we represent as well.
It may well then be worthwhile on behalf of the committee, Chris, maybe asking for a look at that consultation and how that consultation informed the bill as we currently have it.
I think that was spoken to in the second stage. Yeah, that should be easy to do.
That would be worth doing.
Okay.
Thank you. See, okay. It can be good.
Every now and again. Nicola Brogan, MLA, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks everyone for attending here this afternoon. Now, you'll have to forgive me from the outset if I make you repeat yourselves. We have heard a lot of evidence this morning, so apologies for that in advance. But I suppose I just want to make it clear from the outset that, as I've already said in today's session, that I am for integrated education, but there are flaws that have been highlighted to us and we've all identified in this bill, and it needs to be worked out before it can be progressed. And the 2 main ones being the use of the word promote, and then the presumption that all new schools will be integrated schools. But I do think that we need to find a way to support parents that do want their children to be educated in an integrated school. And I think first of all we need to find out what that demand kind of is, and then how we meet it. So I put this question to the Children's Commissioner as well. How else can you see that, without the use of the word promote, how else can you see that we can facilitate that need and make sure that parents and children who do want to be educated in an integrated school can be, without use of the word promote?
Well, I think it has to come down to what, and Nicola, thank you for your comments. I much appreciate it, and for your welcome. I mean, it has to come down to what we mean by an integrated school, because there, in many respects, I could say there already is an integrated sector out there, and it's called the controlled sector. We've already given you statistics, and we've taken you around various schools in Northern Ireland, schools that aren't naturally integrated. I had a student who was going into Catholic maintained school. I was interested in the schools she was going into, and Googled it, and was, on their website, they talked about their ethos within Catholic education, and also how they welcome those of all faiths and none and other faiths. So this is happening, and it happens through shared education anyway. These things are happening naturally. And if you look back in the old days, I'm talking about when I was at school, which was the old days, when there was a desire and an understanding that we needed to know more about each other and learn more about each other, we tried to do what was called EMU, Education for Mutual Understanding, in those days, and those things sort of worked but didn't really. And we've moved so far from two buses arriving in a forest park and two groups of pupils walking on either side of a road and leaving again. We have schools throughout Northern Ireland where sharing is going on a weekly basis, where classes across Google Classroom and other platforms are meeting together, and they are sharing, and teachers are planning together, and they're doing that by celebrating who they are and what they stand for, and understanding that there are differences in society. So these things are being done, and I think that's what parents are signing up for. I know of very few parents who would be against the current process of sharing and shared education and find it to be a very positive thing. But what they're not being asked to do is divest themselves of their own cultural identity and the community identity, which is so incredibly important to them.
Thanks for that, Andy. I agree with you there, but and I get the kind of positive sentiment, and I do agree with you, but I can imagine that others wouldn't. But I'll leave that point there for you, I suppose. The other thing I wanted to touch upon, and I know you have touched upon it in the evidence session, is about the independent review into education, and the fact that the panel has been set up and they've started working on it and stuff. And that I do think that this, if we proceed with this bill, there could be the possibility of having made two kind of jobs at work unnecessarily. But I know that there will be delays, so I haven't made my mind up yet which is the right kind of decision. But can I get your viewpoints on it, just please?
Maybe I'll pick up on this one. I think, as Mrs. Dodd said earlier, this is going to be enshrined into law. And I think that's our concern, that this would be law, and then the review panel would have to adjust their findings dependent on what this would happen. So we would be happier with the independent review being able to work without any adjustments at this stage. I think that's what we would be our favour.
Right. Okay. No, I appreciate that, Peter. As I say, I still haven't made my mind up on that, but I appreciate your viewpoint there. And that's all from me then, Chair. Thank you, and thanks everyone for your evidence here this afternoon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nicola. Thanks, Nicola. Thanks very much indeed to all our witnesses. You've raised a number of issues there that we'll give good consideration to during the closing of our committee stage of the bill. Thanks very much indeed.
Thank
you very much.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Thanks. All the best.
Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Okay, can I ask Assembly Broadcasting to remove the witnesses and to add members back into the spotlight, and to ask the clerk to summarise any actions or requests for additional information resulting from all our briefings today. Thank you, clerk.
Thank you, Chair. I think in terms of specific actions, we'll ask the researcher to bottom out that contretemps that you were having just now about the figures in the last evidence session, because our researcher has still to present to us. And at the top of the meeting, members wanted to know, or the committee wanted to know, whether the bill sponsor was going to bring information on her amendments when she comes next week. I've been able to confirm with her that that is indeed her intention, and she's also just said that she's invited everyone to meet on a party basis, and they can contact her directly to arrange that. So the range of issues that were raised in the evidence sessions, again, majored on the definitional aspects in terms of what an integrated school is and whether there's any difference between this definition and the previous definition on the statute book. Then some issues of the ethos of these schools and how that differs from the other sectors. And then promotion, whether this is proposing to promote over and above, or whether it's positive action for a particular type of school that's been given some protection constitutionally. And the presumption question then as well, there was a lot of discussion about that presumption, what impact that will have on the other sectors. The resource issue came up there at the end in terms of the actual maintenance and how cash strapped all schools are across the board, and also then the issue of specific circumstances and demographics in clause 7 as well. There were some quite philosophical contributions about education, and obviously everyone is thinking hard about how all of these circles might be squared, probably with a longer term view towards the review of education, but it shows that people have been thinking about this very deeply. So the impacts of the review of education, the impacts and comparisons between what's proposed in this bill and what is on the statute book for shared education, whether there's a levelling of a playing field happening here or promotion of one above the other, and then what effect this will have and can have for parental choice. Those were discussed as well. And the detail then of area planning, particularly from the point of view of CCMS and its existing responsibilities, was also raised. The Children's Commissioner then brought in all of the children's rights aspects and the international conventions that we're signed up to, and also referred back to the Good Friday Agreement, and referred to the education system here as riven by sectoral interests. So there was a lot to digest there. I will reflect back to the bill sponsor so that when she presents next week, it will be comprehensively as to these issues. And again, we're updating the bill folder all the time so that members can see these Hansards and lists of issues in their bill folder.
Thanks, Clark.
Anything else?
Chair, could I just make a
Robin?
request?
Go ahead, Robin.
Maybe if the committee clerk, thank the committee clerk for that summary. It seems obvious that the Commissioner is indeed enthusiastic about this particular piece of legislation. It seems, and her role obviously in part is to encourage and facilitate integrated education. Can I just ask, is that to facilitate and integrate education as a whole, as viewed through the prism of the shared education and viewed through the prism of the work that what is happening in the other two sectors of education? And as the example was given, I think particularly strongly by Dr. Gracie, about one particular school in Lurgan, which so is it to look at integrated education as a whole, or is it to look at integrated education as is the integrated education sector?
I presume yeah, certainly. I presume it's integrated education as defined by the Education Reform Order, but we can certainly ask that question, Robin. Yep.
Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Robin.
Any other members wish to come in?
Chair, just briefly, just around the consultation concerns. Can we seek some clarification in relation to that, just to see if there has or has not been consultation with these organisations? Because that's the second or third time I've heard this now.
Yeah. So obviously consultation will have been approved by the Speaker, and my understanding is that the report on the consultation was submitted to the Bill's office, so we can request a copy of that consultation report if that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Any other members wish to come in? No? Okay. Folks, thanks for your participation today. We've kept some degree of timing there and managed to engage with key stakeholders. Clark, we've another group of key stakeholders tomorrow.
We do.
Yeah, starting at 9 a.m. Yeah, Control Sector Support Council being one of them. Yeah, who else is up tomorrow, Clark?
Good question. It is.
Sorry to put you on the spot. It includes the Control Sector Support Council, so another opportunity to engage with key stakeholder in relation to the bill members, and obviously, as was discussed earlier, some key opportunities next week as well, and hopefully that will lead us to our robust completion of the committee stage. Agenda item 12 then, members, is any other business? Nope. Okay, then as I said, the date and time of our next meeting is tomorrow, Thursday, the 11th of November, via Starleaf at 9 a.m. The committee meeting does now adjourn. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair.